Alright, good evening everybody. Welcome to Tech Thursdays, episode 115. This is the 115th episode of the weekly live stream show that we do every Thursdays on the Game Tech Reviews channel. So if you are new to the channel or you recently stumbled upon some of the tech videos, I assume, welcome. We're happy to have you. For those of you that have been viewing, for those of you that are Patreon members as well as YouTube members, either or, I do appreciate it. I did want to point out, we haven't really acknowledged the Patreon supporters and the YouTube members that have joined the channel recently, but I do want to thank all of the support that you guys have provided, because if it wasn't for the Patreon members and the YouTube members, we would not have been able to cover a lot of the kind of niche DDR5 videos that I've done in Q2 and now going into Q3 of this year. I'll give you guys an example. So the QDIM modules that we looked at previously on the Z890, and we also looked at it on the X870E platform to see what happens, kind of that experimental video that we did. That content would not have been possible without the Patreon supporters and now the YouTube members. So I do want to thank you guys for doing that, because that does help me fund the hardware. We don't get any review samples from any of the large, well-known vendors, you know, typical companies that make the GPUs, for example. So this channel is too small to get GPU review samples. So I do have to pay out of pocket for every sort of piece of hardware. But thanks to the support from Patreon and the YouTube members, I am able to at least subsidize some of the cost and afford some of the sort of the niche hardware, like QDIMs, for example, that we looked at previously. So I'll be sure to continue doing that. I'm trying to save up so we can do something akin to what we did last winter, or I guess last fall, when we did a live stream build. So I'm trying to put together something along those lines, because I know those videos are, I feel like when I do those sort of live stream build videos, I get a lot more engagement with the audience, more than average. So, and I think it's very educational for a lot of people who are new to building a PC, or maybe you're someone who is an industry veteran, but you haven't built a computer in a while. Maybe your last major computer build was like 10 years ago, or even like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or even more than a decade ago at this point. Maybe you were on like DDR3, and you're trying to get back into the swing of things with the DDR5 era that we're in currently. So I wanted to acknowledge the support from the long-term viewers. So we'll probably do that more on some of the videos. So this week is going to be similar. Well, we're kind of back to our traditional format for Tech Thursdays. So I know last week, so Tech Thursdays episode 114 was kind of a special episode in the sense that we didn't really talk about news articles or things that were going on in the tech world. We literally just kind of did a deep dive look at different DDR5 configurations. So if you missed out, if you didn't catch that live stream, I did make kind of a montage video, like a condensed version of that live stream that it was uploaded to the channel earlier this week, so you can go ahead and watch that. Kind of like a clips video. I don't do too many of those, but I do think that if content during a live stream is, I think, really useful, or it adds a lot of value to the community, I tend to make that its own video, because I think that a lot of the tech community can benefit from using those type of videos. I mean, just the other day, actually, so just to kind of kick things off, you know, if you guys, we were talking about the BIOSes. There's been a lot of BIOS updates for AM5 recently. So MSI put out the AGESA 1203E BIOS, and then they removed it from their website for a very good reason, because there was a serious problem with version A36. So if any of you manage to download A36, and if you flash that BIOS, you're going to need to utilize BIOS flashback to update to the latest one, which is A39, because I experienced the crazy problem on the MSI Godlike literally today, because I tried to update the BIOS from A36 to A39, and once you try the process with mFlash, it gets stuck in a loop between error code 0D and error code FF. So it would swing from FF to 0D, back to FF, then 0D, FF, 0D, FF, 0D. So basically, MSI had to do an emergency BIOS update. They literally pulled that BIOS from their site because it would cause people who don't know how to, or maybe they're not that experienced with updating the BIOS, to run into this problem. But even if you're experienced, like I ran into the problem, and the only way to recover from that problem, because I tried turning off the power supply, unplugging the computer, plugging it back in, and once you get into 0D, FF, 0D, FF, where it repeats forever, you're basically screwed. It's like it's never going to get back to Windows at that point. So the only way to fix it is to use BIOS flashback, because you cannot get into the BIOS because it will never post. It's basically a bricked BIOS if you try to access mFlash from the BIOS menu, which I was trying to update to A39 using mFlash, because I typically update my BIOS, and I think most people do this the same way. You update your BIOS from within the BIOS. Like if you're on MSI, you utilize their BIOS update tool in their UEFI called mFlash. So I tried to access that, and I get into this boot loop of FF, 0D, FF, 0D, and it never goes to mFlash. And they noted the issue. Fix system freeze after using specific memory. Okay, they say specific memory. I don't know what that means. All I know is I experienced the issue, and I had to use BIOS flashback to force update it to A39. So I managed to fix the issue, but I can only imagine someone out there with less experience dealing with BIOS update procedures, they could be in a world of panic, and the anxiety's rising, blood pressure's rising, all that stuff. They don't know what to do. They're not super technically inclined, or maybe they're not super experienced building computers. So I can totally understand the amount of stress that something like this would cause. But anyway, I was able to fix it. So the main thing is use BIOS flashback. That'll fix it. Not too happy with MSI. I've kind of said this on previous streams before. They are not the best one this generation in terms of BIOS updates, BIOS support. I mean, the BIOS update cadence is fine, but like MSI, from my experience testing all 4 brands, MSI this generation, now it's not always like this, MSI seems to have had the most issues with like random things, like USB hubs, like preventing Windows from booting up, for example, or Linux can't even boot up. Well, maybe Linux boots up, but I don't know. Like UEFI related problems, which means that it doesn't matter if you're on Linux or on Windows. If it's a UEFI problem and the BIOS doesn't like a particular USB device or a USB hub, I mean, there's threads all over MSI support forums. There's threads all over Reddit regarding these topics. So not too happy with MSI. I mean, I am more of a power user, so I've run into additional problems that the average user won't see, namely things with like PCIe devices not initializing properly on the first cold boot, so you gotta like keep boot looping it until it finally detects it. Like things of that nature, and having to troubleshoot that with a different vendor's motherboard, whether it's Asus or ASRock or Gigabyte, and then like I don't see the problem on the other vendor's thing, but I see the problem on MSI, so it points to an MSI problem. Then arguing with MSI support that it's their problem and it's not the the card or whatever it is I'm testing because it works fine on the other vendors. You know, like those sort of problems are things that the average user is probably not going to run into too often. But as a power user, someone who tests a lot of different PCIe devices, a lot of different USB devices, someone who fully loads the motherboard with things like multiple graphics cards, multiple NVMe drives, RAID cards, USB 4 devices, 4K 60 capture cards, 10 gigabit NICs, all kinds of things like that. I have experienced the most problems with MSI recently, this generation. Second worst, Gigabyte. Asus and ASRock are at the top of their game right now. Like Asus and ASRock, funnily enough, Asus and ASRock are the ones that are like the most controversial in the news with like motherboards and voltage things and all that stuff. On the flip side of that, Asus and ASRock seem to have all the other stuff working totally fine. So if you're a power user and if you need to run a lot of RAM or you need to run a lot of stuff in your motherboard, personally, Asus and ASRock either or are probably my first top recommendation this generation. So anyway, MSI fixed that problem according to this. So they have the latest BIOS again. So at this point in time, every single motherboard vendor, MSI, ASRock, Asus, and Gigabyte, which I don't have their site open right now, but well, actually, no, I take that back. Gigabyte, we have to look at them again, because I don't think Gigabyte actually has the latest. Actually, no, they do. Let's see. X870E, Extreme AI Top. So we go to the support page, if it'll load. And we go to BIOS. Okay, so Gigabyte does have the latest as of 3 days ago, June 23rd. So they all, as long as you're on the newer chipset, so this is not true if you're on like X670E. I checked X670E Aorus, they didn't have this BIOS. So, and I checked earlier today. So unless they updated it literally today, the older chipsets, so if you're on an older AM5 motherboard that's meant to be paired up with Zen 4, and you're on Gigabyte, you probably don't have the latest BIOS available. But maybe you do. I don't know. It could be board specific. But anyway, all of them, as long as you're on X870E, which is the enthusiast class motherboard chipset for AM5. So as long as you're on X870E, doesn't matter what X870, as long as it says X870E, you have access to the latest AGESA BIOS. So this is what I call the magical BIOS, because this BIOS finally reduces memory training, and we looked at it last Tech Thursday, so episode 114. This magical BIOS reduces the memory training time significantly, especially on Asus for 4 DIMMs. This BIOS adds the 4 DIMM dual rank support, like full fast training of dual rank 4 sticks of memory. So you've got, it literally says it on MSI's support page. Support all 64 gigabyte times 4. That means 256 gigabyte of RAM. So it supports that with fast train and optimized 2DPC. That means 4 sticks of RAM, single rank capability. And this is the magical words, and this requires someone who understands technology to translate this language, because someone's going to read optimized 2DPC 1R capability. They don't know what this means. I'll tell you what this means. This, I will say this in an easier to understand way. This means 64 gigabytes, 4 sticks, total 64 gigabytes, which means 4 times 16. So you're running 4 16 gigabyte sticks of RAM. So your total capacity is 64 gigabytes of RAM across 4 sticks, or 24 gigabyte sticks times 4, so the total will be 96 gigabytes of RAM, which is what I'm personally running right now on this live stream computer. It means fast memory training. It literally means if you run 4 sticks of DDR5 in those capacities, the memory training will be fast. No more 5-minute wait times, no more 6 minutes of waiting around for the ROG crosshair to train all 4 sticks of memory. Now it does it in like 35 seconds. So we're talking like massive reduction in the amount of time wasted on memory training. So this is what I call, that's why I call it the magical BIOS, because this is a BIOS that they needed to get out for AM5 literally 2 years ago or more. Like, this BIOS has been needed, like, it's 2 years late, you know, like, but at least now it's here. So no more super long waiting around for DDR5 to train if you want to run 4 sticks of single rank DIMMs. Because that is what I'm personally running. You guys, anyone who's been watching this channel for a while, you guys know all my current builds, except the test system, which we were looking at on last week's episode of Tech Thursdays. All my test systems, or all my live work systems, all feature 4 sticks of DDR5 at like 6,000 or better. And that is to prove that it can be done. So we're literally running, we're just running 4 sticks of memory right now. On this computer, on the gaming computer that we were streaming Death Stranding 2 on yesterday evening, that one has 4 sticks of RAM. And then the Intel computer behind me has 4 sticks of RAM. So like all of them have 4 sticks of RAM, DDR5, maxed out. So it's totally possible. And this new BIOS even makes 256 gigabytes of RAM a reality on this motherboard, on the X870E motherboards. So that means MSI has support. Asus's ROG also has the new Magic BIOS. I call it the 3E. The 3E. If you're on AM5, and if you're not on 3E, you need to update to 3E. I keep wanting to say E3 like it's the gaming, you know, extravaganza from years ago. If you're not on E3 or 3E, basically if you're not on the latest BIOS and you're on an X870 motherboard, you really need to get on the latest BIOS. Not only does this BIOS dramatically improve memory compatibility, which is probably the thing that most people care about, it also addresses a CPU security vulnerability. Now, Gigabyte was the only one to mention this in their notes. Fix AMD CPU microcode signature verification vulnerability. So there's a CVE. This is a security vulnerability. This is fixed with this BIOS. Now, Intel fixed this problem because it affects Intel also. Intel fixed it partially back in April, but Intel has not fully fixed it as of now. I need to check on Z890. Z790, it's partially mitigated, but it's not fully mitigated. So AMD has the full mitigation of this, but it did take them like 2 or 3 months longer to get something out there. At least Intel did get something out pretty fast, but Intel's is kind of like a partial mitigation. So just to make sure that people are aware of this issue. So the microcode, this is the other reason why you probably want to be on the Magic BIOS, because it fixes a vulnerability and it drastically improves DDR5 training times, especially if you want to run 4 sticks of memory. Okay, ASRock states, update the AGESA. Oh, ASRock says that this BIOS also adds support for an upcoming mysterious CPU. So a new CPU is going to be launching soon for AM5. I'm not sure if we're going to cover that on this channel. We may or may not look at that. We did something similar last year. But I don't know. Maybe that would be the live stream build video. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, there's a secret upcoming CPU which will be launching soon this summer for AM5. Now, there will also be a new Threadripper series launching this summer as well. The Zen 5 based Threadripper CPUs will be coming out. So the Threadripper motherboards, so TRX 50 motherboards, we briefly talked about them last week. Those should be launching a month from now, if I'm not mistaken. So that I don't know if we'll cover, because Threadripper is like, yeah, it's really expensive, so I don't know if we'll be covering that. But we may cover this upcoming new CPU for AM5. And we'll probably cover it with the ASRock X870E Phantom Gaming. That's the one that we'll probably use. Okay, well, that was kind of my main public service announcement about if you're like on an older BIOS, get on the latest BIOS, at least if you're on AM5. Now, we didn't talk about Z890. Let me talk about Z890 for those of you on Z890. Z890 Maximus Hero. So I have been updating and looking at the Z890 platform as well. So we will be doing some content on Z890 real soon on this channel, because I feel like we've spent so much time talking about AM5. I did talk about QDIM. We looked at QDIM on Intel on the Z890 platform. So Z890, though it is not the best performer, like it's not going to win any awards in like gaming or anything, which I feel like desktop is too much. People who are looking at desktop reviews, they're too, I feel like gaming performance carries way too much weight. Like, personally, I think the gaming benchmarks are overvalued by people who are looking at these reviews. So, and for Intel, we all know, all the enthusiasts know, currently AMD is the king of PC gaming. AMD basically has been making all the right moves for the last maybe 5 years now. Like, it's kind of weird because AMD has done everything except pull the rug out from Intel, because Intel's still able to flood the mobile market with so much volume. We've talked about this on the stream multiple times. But AMD, not only has AMD like kind of won the desktop war, at least right now in this generation, in gaming, AMD has also made a lot of strategic acquisitions. So the Pensando, all that stuff that they're doing with AI, the networking stuff, so they're getting into like telecommunications for data centers. AMD has made so many correct moves, correct decisions that have helped them get into all these positions now. Like, think about it like this. Microsoft announced recently the Xbox Ally, the partnership with ASUS, and they recently announced a strategic partnership with AMD. So for the gaming division of Microsoft. So whatever that means, some people are hinting at that means that they're going to make like the next Xbox that competes with PS6, that like the actual, not like the ROG mobile device, but like the actual console, like the next gen Xbox. It's going to be another AMD based thing. So that's what a lot of people are kind of speculating at this point. Other people are saying that no, Microsoft isn't going to make a traditional console anymore, which is what I seem to believe, but who knows what they're going to do. The point is, Intel has kind of fallen behind on a merit standpoint, meaning if you look at the products, compare Intel and AMD, objectively speaking, AMD is ahead of Intel. However, Intel does have a very strong offering if you look at the platform as a whole. Meaning, if you ignore the fact that they're losing in gaming, like if you forget about gaming for a second, and you just look at what the Z890 platform offers. This platform offers a much better feature set compared to the previous Z790. What do I mean by that? Well, the Z890 features Thunderbolt 4. Now, someone might say, oh, who cares, because AMD, the new AM5, has USB 4, which is the exact same thing. And if you were to say that, you would be absolutely correct. USB 4 and Thunderbolt 4 are basically the same thing. The only difference is that Thunderbolt 4 is supposed to offer, now the vendor, the motherboard manufacturer, whoever is selling the Thunderbolt 4 product must fulfill the requirements. And oftentimes in my own testing of these Thunderbolt 4 add-in cards, a lot of these vendors are not actually implementing the full Thunderbolt 4 feature set. So you're basically getting USB 4 with a Thunderbolt label on it if it's on an Intel motherboard. And that's the sad reality of it. So the main difference that Thunderbolt 4 offers over USB 4 is in the BIOS. You can select certain security features. You can turn on security handshake things. So like, for example, if somebody plugs in a Thunderbolt device or a USB 4 device into the Z890 Hero, for example, this very motherboard, which we're going to be looking at on the channel again real soon, if someone were to plug in, let's say they plug in an AverMedia Live Gamer Bolt, which is the very capture card that I use to show you guys Death Stranding 2, like we have done for the past 2 evenings. So we did it last night, and the night before we were live streaming Death Stranding 2, and we will be streaming Death Stranding 2 this weekend. So if you want to see more of that gameplay, tune in. But if someone plugs in a AverMedia Live Gamer Bolt, which is probably the best external 4K 60 HDR capture card on the market right now, if they plug it in to the Intel or the ROG Maximus Z890 Hero, they can set, or they're supposed to be able to go into the BIOS of the motherboard and set security features, meaning they can set like authentication levels. So the device is not allowed to automatically connect and start working. They can require things like the user approval. So meaning the user will have to manually go in to the dashboard in the operating system and select, yes, I will allow the device to connect fully, or no, it's denied, you know, that kind of thing. You can do that with Thunderbolt. To my knowledge, I don't think you can do that with USB 4, but I could be wrong, and maybe USB 4 has the exact same functionality, because at the end of the day, for those of you that do not know, USB 4 is nothing more than Intel donating Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 standard spec to the USB forum, and that is basically what USB 4 is. So USB 4, you can think of it like, oh, it's the open standard version of Thunderbolt 3 and 4. That is exactly what USB 4 is, meaning USB 4 leverages a technology that Thunderbolt uses called PCIe tunneling. This means that if you have an external graphics card enclosure, you can plug your external graphics card enclosure into your AMD ROG X870E. You can plug it into your AMD AM5 X870E or X870 motherboard. As long as you plug it into a 40 gigabit USB 4 port on the back, you can control, or you can utilize external graphics cards just like you can on Thunderbolt laptops. So this is the feature that USB 4 supports. We've already done a video about this a couple years back. So all of this content is not new. It's stuff that I've already covered on videos, but I know that A lot of people that watch these live streams are newer viewers to the channel, so if you haven't seen those videos, this is kind of why we're reiterating some of this stuff. But anyway, for Z890, it offers Thunderbolt 4 as standard equipment. It also offers Wi-Fi 7. So in that sense, it is basically the same. It is equal to the AMD version, which is the X870E. So you have X870E, which is AM5, and you have Z890, which is Intel's LGA 1851. Both of them are at feature parity for the most part. Now, where the Z890 platform proves that it is a newer, more advanced platform is the fact that this platform supports CUDIM technology, clock redriver based DDR5. You cannot do this with AM5. So you can, however, install those memory modules and they will work, but they're only going to work as though they were just regular UDIM DDR5. So this is something that I expect to see change with the introduction of Zen 6 a year from now, or a little more than a year from now. So keep that in mind. The other thing that Z890 offers is potential for Thunderbolt 5 support. However, there is currently only one motherboard on the market that has the integrated Thunderbolt 5 chip built into the motherboard, and that is none other than the Maximus Extreme. Let's go to that one, Z890 Maximus Extreme from ASUS ROG. This is the only motherboard, to my knowledge, that features, there may be a Gigabyte AI Top Extreme Edition or something, but to my knowledge, from the launch last year of Intel's Z890, the Maximus Extreme features Thunderbolt 5. So this is the pinnacle of consumer desktop in terms of the feature set, because it actually has, and it's funny how they don't actually have a picture of the I/O on the back, but those two ports right there that I'm circling with the mouse, those are the Thunderbolt 5 ports. So this motherboard features full Thunderbolt 5. However, it sacrifices Thunderbolt 4, which is unfortunate because this is a $1,000 motherboard, and it is the only motherboard that features Thunderbolt 5. So you're having to pay an incredible amount of money if you want to experience Thunderbolt 5. But this is something that is completely absent on AM5. There is no USB 5 today. But USB 5 would be the equivalent of Thunderbolt 5 whenever, if and when USB 5 ever becomes a thing. So just kind of like weird hardware trivia. So that's what I wanted to say about Z890. Okay, let's talk about the NVIDIA RTX 5050. I think this is out today, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Isn't there like a review of it? I'm pretty sure I saw a review somewhere. Or maybe nobody reviewed it, but I know it was talked about. Okay, so here we go. So NVIDIA has their website blog article talking about, oh yeah, never mind, it's not out. It's second half of July. It's a month from now. So the Geforce RTX 5050 is coming out starting at $250, which means it'll probably be $300. I don't know how much VRAM it's going to have. Does anybody know? Maybe it's right here. 8 gigabytes of VRAM on a 128-bit bus. The maximum GPU temperature will be 87 degrees. Total graphics power, 130 watts. Required system power, 550 watts. One 8-pin power connector, or 300 watt or greater PCIe Gen 5 cable adapter in the box. So what does that even mean? So they're saying... Oh, they're saying that it's going to... If it uses the 12-volt high power, it means that it'll come with a dual 8-pin to the 12-volt. The 12-pin thing. Why would they even bother to do that? I feel like that's just dumb. Like, NVIDIA shouldn't even bother to use that connector if the GPU only pulls that much power. So here are the performance numbers. So NVIDIA is comparing the RTX 5050 to the 3050. However, they are kind of showing like fake benchmarks here, except for the games at the very bottom of the screen. So they are showing Avowed, and they are saying that Avowed on a 3050 does about 40, maybe 30, about 40, 35 frames per second, 35 to 40 frames per second, somewhere in there, is Avowed on a 3050. They are saying the RTX 5050 can turn on 4 times frame gen and get over 150 frames per second with frame gen maxed to ×4, utilizing their new feature, which is exclusive to the 50 series. You cannot use this feature if you're not on a 50 series graphics card. You're basically left in the dust as though you were on an AMD card. So anyone who's on like 40 series or older are basically in the same boat as AMD. They don't have access to multi-frame gen multiplier. So in this case, 4x frame gen with ray tracing. So you can kind of figure out, like, basically, if you want to figure out the natural number, you would take this green bar and you chop it up into 4 equal pieces, and that would be the performance. So I'm going to say if I chop this up, you know, it's probably going to be around 50 something frames per second, the native frame rate for this. And these are 1080p results, by the way. These are 1080p. So everything shown is 1080p, and they are using, NVIDIA themselves are testing with a Ryzen 7 9800X3D. They state it right there at the bottom. They're also using DLSS quality mode, which means this isn't even native 1080p. This is some resolution that is less than 1080p. Then upscaled, there's that key word, upscaled to 1080p using DLSS quality. Then on top of the upscaling, they turn on 4 times frame gen, and these are the results they get. So they're saying Cyberpunk 2077 with 4x frame gen and upscaling can achieve 160 frames per second at a fake 1080p resolution with a whole bunch of fake frames. So like 75% of the frames are fake. They're all interpolated frames, and the native resolution isn't even the true resolution. So this GPU is not an impressive GPU at all. These results are actually terrible, but they're going to paint this, they're going to put all in the makeup to make it look as good as possible. Oh, look how bad the 3050 is, and look how good the 5050 is with all the makeup, all that frame gen, smear all that frame gen on there, put all that DLSS blur on there, soften up that image, use, it's basically they're Instagramming up the 5050 results so it looks so good compared to the 3050, because the 3050 is so old. Oh, it's Ampere. Oh, it's the Nintendo Switch 2 technology. It's so old. That's basically what they're saying. All right, so that's the results for that. What is this? 50 greater? They're saying, okay, they're claiming that this is greater than 50 times the performance for tens of millions of gamers. I have no idea what this is trying to say, because they're utilizing a bunch of results that no one has any idea, like, what is this like, with respect to what? Like, they don't tell you what the games are. All they say is that there's 20 games. Across 20 games, these are the results. And they're telling you DLSS on, DLSS off. And the 1050 is like down here. Like, okay, the 0 line is here. The 1050 is so close to 0, which basically means it's inside the black hole's event horizon, so it can't get out. It's beyond saving. The 1060 is falling in. It's literally just falling into the black hole to never escape. The 1650 is the 1060. There's nothing, there's like, it isn't even different. The 1660 is like trying to use escape velocity, but there's too much gravity. It's not going to be able to escape, so you know it's going to fall in there. The 3050 is able to get out. The reason why the 3050 is able to get out of the black hole, it can escape with the escape velocity, is because it has the DLSS thrusters required to cancel out the gravitational effect of terrible unoptimized games that are trying to gobble it up. That's basically what's happening to the 3050, the 3060. It continues on, but the 4060 is more powerful than the 3060 and the 3050 because the 4060 can leverage the frame gen rockets. The frame gen rockets give it another boost so it can get away from that black hole. It's not going to get sucked in anytime soon. But these Amperes, these Switch 2 technology cards, they're gonna run out of fuel. They're just gonna like die off, burned out, VRAM artifacts, fan doesn't work anymore. Oh, too much dust in that heatsink. Goodbye. Fall in the black hole, into the abyss. That's the end of the 3050 and the 3060. So this is the reason why all of the comparisons are against the 3050. Because the 3050 is on its last legs. And NVIDIA knows that the people who spend money on an RTX 3050 typically hold on to their graphics card until it's so full of dust and the fan can barely keep up because it's choked in dust. It's literally starving for air. And there's like, who knows what's in that computer case. Cat fur, dust, I don't know, termites, roaches, whatever. Like whatever's inside that case, the 3050 has had to deal with that for the last like how many years is that card? Like 4 years old or whatever. Like it's so old, it's like, it's just, I'm tired, man. I want to retire. The 3050 is basically like Verso at the end of Expedition 33. I'm tired. I want to retire. I'm tired of working. I'm sick and tired of this owner. This is awful. I don't like playing Apex Legends. I don't like playing PUBG or Fortnite. And the user keeps wanting me to render Fortnite with RT at 1440p, and I'm a 3050, and I'm tired of working. This is the sort of condition the 3050s are in. They want to quit. They want to retire. They're done. NVIDIA knows that they want to retire. So they're like, 50-50. 50-50. It sounds cool. RTX 5050. Who doesn't think that's a cool name? 50-50. It's 50-50. It's 50-50 good, 50-50 bad. You can't go wrong. Multi-frame gen, Cyberpunk 2077, sub 1080p, upscale that up to 1080p, max that 4x frame gen, 160 frames per second, blurry, smeary mess. Great stuff, man. Starting at $250. There's your 50-50. Okay. So coming soon, a month from now, the 50-50 will be here. You got off the process train on that 10-year life. Wait, what? Oh, we weren't talking about a 10-year lifespan. We were talking about like a 5-year lifespan for those GPUs. Those GPUs are tired, man. They just want to retire. 12 nanometer wide path. The heater. The heater? Well, anyway, the reality is, I guess I don't know if this point that I wanted to make was clear when I was talking about the 50 or the 3050 wanting to retire. So basically, NVIDIA knows, yeah, this is the last thing I want to say about this, then we're going to move on. NVIDIA knows that the gamers that have lower end graphics cards, meaning the lower end your graphics card is, the longer you're going to keep it. Now that sounds backwards. You know, like, why would somebody who buys an RTX 3090 Ti want to get rid of it for a 4090? And then, oh wait, the 5090 came out this year. I gotta upgrade my 4090 to a 5090. Like, why would someone want to do that? The reality is they will do that. A lot of people who have the flagship GPU will pretty much, not all of them, but a large chunk of them will overwhelmingly upgrade every generation. Versus the people who have RTX 3050. The people with 3050 are more likely to hold on to it until the fan breaks down because it's caked in too much dust and cat fur or dog fur or whatever. That's the reality. People don't understand the logic. The logic sounds backwards. Because it's like, why would you pay so much money for an RTX 4090 just to upgrade in like 2 years or less to an RTX 5090? You know, versus someone who's like, someone bought a 3050 and they still hold on to it. They completely skipped the 40 series. They were asleep at the wheel when the 40 series came and left. They're just sitting there at the train station. The 40 series comes in, leaves, and they're just still asleep in the station. You know, like they're just waiting for the next train. I'm waiting for the next train. 4090 train comes and goes. 4080 train, 4070 Ti, 4070, 4060, 4060 Ti. All the super dupers just fly right through like bullet trains. You know what I'm saying? And the people with the 3050s are just like, they're just like that the whole time. They're completely oblivious to the existence of the 40 series. Then the 50 series comes, and they're completely oblivious to the 50 series. But then their graphics card dies. It just dies, you know, peaceful death. It died due to overheating. The fan wasn't working. It was caked in dust for too long. So they have to go buy another graphics card. Not because they want to, because they kind of have to. And there's no more warranty because the GPU's too old. And it didn't cost them that much in the first place. So they decide, okay, I had a 3050. What am I going to get? The 5000. They don't even know it's called 50 series. They call it 5000 series. That's how you know how tech illiterate they are. They don't even refer to it as RTX 50. They refer to it as NVIDIA GeForce GTX 5000. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't even know the right name. So maybe they know RTX, but they'll be like, RTX 5000. That's a politically incorrect way to refer to NVIDIA's product. It's not RTX 5000. It's RTX 50 series, but they don't know. They don't know because they're not like a tech person, you know, like they don't care. They're gonna spend $250 on a 5050 in August, and they're gonna hold on to it until until the wheels fall off, until the fans break. You know, like they don't care, the warranty, whatever. They're not gonna, just whatever. So I mean that's the reality of the people who buy the lower end, the entry level graphics cards. Because these people, all they want to do is play like Fortnite or PUBG or Apex Legends or League of Legends. You know, like that's all they want to do. They just want to play those esports games. It's like, who cares? You don't need RTX 5090 to play League of Legends at 1080p resolution. You know, like who does that? So it's fine at the end of the day. So That's buyer's remorse. You're gonna hit. You went from a 1070 to a 5070 Ti. That's a word. Wait, just cleaned a couple PSU. We weren't talking about PSU. We're talking about the GPU. You never played any of those games? I mean, I think the last time I played Fortnite, it was probably before the pandemic. And the last time I played PUBG was probably during the pandemic. The last time I played Apex Legends was probably during the pandemic. So I haven't played. I think out of those 3 games, Apex Legends was the one that I probably played the most recently. But when I say recent, I mean like 4 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And then PUBG was probably a year before that. And then I'm pretty sure I haven't played Fortnite since like 2019 or something like that. So, like, yeah. So, like, I don't play those games, but I'm just telling you, the type of people that do play those games are the people that buy like RTX 5050. Not everybody. Some people will buy higher end cards, like up to like a 5070, I would say. Like, I would think that the people who play the PUBG at like 1440p, they're probably the type of person who's going to want to upgrade to like a 5070 if they're on a much older GPU. So, I mean, Linus had a really good section on the WAN show recently talking about statistics show, I forget where that study was done, but basically they were talking about that most gamers, I think he said something like 40% of gamers will spend less than $500 on a graphics card, on their graphics card upgrades. Which, to me, like, Luke and Linus were both kind of, like, shocked when they heard that. I was like, I can understand. To me, that sounds kind of normal. But they have a point. Like, years ago, a decade ago, if you were spending $500... So, okay, a decade ago, we would have been in 2015. So, this time, 10 years ago, the fastest graphics card from AMD was the R9 Fury X. R9 Fury X. This graphics card came out 10 years ago, June 24th, 2015. I called it right. Literally 10 years ago. The fastest graphics card from AMD was the R9 Fury X. That was it. The reference card used liquid cooling. It was the first graphics card to ever use HBM memory. 4 gigabytes of HBM memory. So you can see this was the predecessor to the chiplet-based technology. So that was 10 years ago. To think about how a graphics card was a decade ago. HBM1, 4 gigabytes, 64 ROPs, 4,096 cores, 4,096-bit bus. That was it. The fastest GPU, dual 8-pin from AMD 10 years ago. The NVIDIA equivalent at that time was none other than the GTX 980 Ti. The 980 Ti. This was the fastest graphics card from NVIDIA 10 years ago. Now, technically, there was another. So, this would have been known today as, in today's world, this would be known as the RTX 5090. So think about that. This is the RTX 5090 from 10 years ago. And the price of this card was $650. $650 for the RTX 5090. a decade ago. Put that into perspective. So when Linus and Luke were talking about how 40%, which is almost 50% of the PC gaming market, spends less than $500. $500 was already kind of the top of the market, almost the top of the market a decade ago. Like literally, that's how it was. So, but a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people have come into gaming on PC in the last 10 years. So they have no idea, you know, like they're becoming more accustomed to these higher price points. Whereas I think most of the people that are complaining about graphics card pricing are the people who remember how it used to be, where you might not even buy a 980 Ti or an R9 Fury because you thought that, you know, $650 is, who would be stupid enough to spend $650 on a graphics card? Like that sounds so dumb. That is such a waste of money. That is being financially irresponsible. You know, like that is the mentality that a lot of people would have when it came to like spending that much money on this type of hardware just for it to get replaced in like 2 years' time. In the case of NVIDIA, this graphics card was only the fastest graphics card in the GeForce gaming market for what, like 11 months? This was superseded. It was succeeded by the GTX 1080 11 months later. In May of 2016, the GTX 1080 launched. So this thing was no longer the best card. In fact, this card lost to not only the 1080, it also lost to a 1070. Even the 1070 was faster than this. So that is the reason why, that's another reason why people didn't really think that buying these super Halo, you know, top of the line GPUs were really worth it, because they're only going to be top dog for like, you know, at most 2 years. But typically it'd be like 1 year, because you have to remember the card that this card superseded in terms of the performance was the 980, because the 980 came out in 2014 and it was faster than the 780 Ti. So 780 Ti was the end of 2013. 980 was in the second half of 2014. This was June of 2015. And then in May of 2016, there was GTX 1080. So literally, every single year, if you had, in any given year, if you had the best NVIDIA graphics card on the market with less than a year's time, your graphics card would no longer be the fastest graphics card. In fact, it would end up being like the third fastest graphics card. That is another reason why people didn't really value or care too much to get these like super high-end graphics cards or these top-tier graphics cards, because they were constantly getting leapfrogged over by newer stuff. Kind of like smartphones. Every year there's a new smartphone, you know, like they get replaced like every year, sometimes like twice a year, you know, like I remember when there was like the iPhone 3, iPhone 3S, you know, like they would replace like in less than a year.
Back then I could buy 2 Titan cards and run them in Schlee, and it is still cheaper than a single 5090 now.
Yeah, I didn't even mention the Titan, because talking about the Titan, the Titan today there is a card called, let's see if I don't know if I should bring this up. So there is a card called the RTX Pro Blackwell. This is a very infamous graphics card. The RTX Pro Blackwell. Actually, is that the right one? Yeah, I guess. No, why is it this one? This is like the blower style? This is not the one. Hold on. Pro 6000. Yeah, there it is, Pro 6000. So the Titan today is this graphics card. It's called The NVIDIA RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell. This is the successor to the Titan. So the Titan still exists, but the Titan is so far out of reach. It is so far out of reach. Because you have to remember, the Titan back then was $1,000. The 980 Ti was $650. The Titan X Maxwell was basically the same speed as the 980 Ti. It was a little bit faster or a little bit slower, depending on what you were doing with it. It had more VRAM, but it, you know, like, okay, it had like 12 gigs of VRAM if I remember correctly. And okay, like everyone was on 1080p back in 2015. So like I think there were like a handful of people that were maybe on 1440p or something like that, but no one was really running above 1080p back in 2015. So 12 gigabytes of VRAM didn't really do anything unless you were doing productivity apps. So the Titan was always like so expensive that the average PC enthusiast or gamer didn't even consider it. Like they just kind of like didn't even think it existed, to be honest. Like it just didn't register in their mind. That is similar with this today. So today, the Titan, just like 10 years ago, the Titan is so out of reach. However, now it is so out of reach because of the price tag that people don't even register its existence. This graphics card, for those of you that do not know, has a launch price of over $8,500. So here it is. $8,565 for the current Titan RTX, also known as the NVIDIA Blackwell or NVIDIA RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell. Now that is a long name. I just call it the current Titan. This is the current Titan. And it is over $8,500. It is available from Newegg. If someone wanted to buy it, Newegg has a whole bunch of them, so you can easily get one from Newegg if you're able to buy it from Newegg. In fact, the way it works on Newegg is you have to go through a quoting system, meaning you can't just add it to cart and check out because it's so expensive. You have to click on request a quote, and then a literal sales representative, a commission-based salesperson from Newegg business will reach out to you asking you, like, what is the use case? How much do you want to purchase? Because they're going to think you want to buy, like, more than one. Crazy stuff. Yes, they're expecting you to buy more than one of this $8,500 something graphics card. That is how far out of reach it is from the gamers. So this is definitely like business class territory. That's hence the reason why it says Pro. This is not for someone who wants to play Call of Duty. This is definitely not for someone who wants to play Call of Duty. The Call of Duty people are literal peasants. They're literal peasants. The COD bros, the Fortnite people, the PUBG, the Counter-Strike scrubs, all those people, this is not for them. This is outside of their reach. You know what I mean? Like, those people drive, like, I don't know, like, they drive Corollas or something. Like this is for someone who's driving, like, a BMW or a Mercedes, like, S-Class or something. This is not for, like, someone who's playing Call of Duty. It isn't even for someone like me who's playing Death Stranding 2, you know? Like, I'm not even playing it on PC. It isn't even out on PC. The game looks great, but, you know, like, yeah, no. So, yeah, this is a different kind of product for a different type of person.
I would consider it if I could get it for $8,000. In Hong Kong, they are selling it north of $10,000 because of the embargo.
The embargo? Oh, wait, that affects Hong Kong. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, the thing is, I know, okay, I'll let you in on something. So technically, Newegg will sell it for under $8,000, but the catch is they're expecting a volume quantity order. Because, okay, this is going to tie in with what Jensen said years ago. Remember, does everybody remember when he said back in 2018 when he revealed the RTX 2080 Ti? Remember the old saying, guys, the more you buy, the more you save. The more you buy, the more you save. The more you buy, the more you save. The more When he said that, that is exactly what he's referring to. Because if someone wants to seriously buy an RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell, it is not meant for an individual consumer. It is meant for someone who's like going to use this for some sort of professional money-making enterprise use case. You know what I mean? Like, hence, they will sell it to you for less than $8,000. But the idea is there's some minimum quantity. Now, I don't know what that minimum quantity order is to get certain discount brackets, but literally Jensen wasn't lying when he said the more you buy, the more you save. Meaning, let's say someone wanted to buy like 10 of these. If they're going to buy 10 of these, Newegg will probably quote them a quote of about maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out random numbers, but they're going to probably quote $6,800 per card. So if you buy 10 of these, they'll probably sell you all 10 of them for a unit price of just under $7,000. So if you buy, let's say you're going to buy 50 of them. If you're going to buy, now that is a lot of money, man. If you think of the list price, $8,500 times 20. That's a lot. But they'll give you a greater discount. So the more you buy, the more you save. They'll keep lowering the individual unit price as long as you're buying more of them. See, that's how it works. But this is how business to business sales work. The more you buy, the more you save. Which means when Jensen said that, he was so like out of his element because he was presenting to the press that was the focus was the gaming market, hence PC desktop gaming. Whereas you're talking about individual sale price. So I guess he wasn't thinking of actual gamers when he said that. He might have been thinking of system integrators, OEM, like AIB partners, like they're going to buy a bunch of just this thing from him. And the more of these they buy in one order, the greater their discount will be. Hence, he said, the more you buy, the more you save. So he was really talking to distributors, manufacturers, meaning companies like Asus, MSI, PNY. They were the target audience, not the actual gamers. So yeah. And for the record, this is significantly faster than the RTX 5090. The 5090, to put things into perspective, is only 83% compared to this RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell. The 4090 is only 63% of this Titan graphics card. And the 4080 and AMD's current flagship, the 7900 XTX, these two graphics cards are only about 50% of the Blackwell Titan. So the 9070 XT, the 5070 Ti, like these cards are less than 50% compared to the Blackwell Titan. So these are some weak sauce cards compared to the Blackwell Titan. But remember, this is kind of, it's not meant for gamers. 96 gigabytes of VRAM of GDDR7 is kind of, and over 24,000 CUDA cores is a sign that this is not for gamers. Because gamers don't need 96 gigabytes of VRAM. But yeah, I don't know. To me, this is like, the use case for this is out of the realm of what we cover on this channel. I mean, we could do some videos about AI. I don't really think people are really that interested in that. I may still end up doing some videos about AI use case. If I can get my hands on like an AMD Strix Halo, like a laptop with a Strix Halo or something, like, you know, something that's a little bit larger than, say, this right here. So this is a Strix Point ThinkPad that I've got here. So this is my daily driver ThinkPad laptop. I may do a video about this if you guys are interested. This is my little 14-inch travel laptop that I've been using since March of this year. So this is Strix Point. This is not Strix Halo. If I had a Strix Halo, though, I would be able to do some more videos about unified architecture and, you know, like how that's different from this thing, which is, it is still monolithic, but this is your typical laptop with your typical DDR5, LPDDR5X actually, which is what this is using. But yeah, you guys get the idea. But see, what I've heard, like when I've told gamers about this, when I make the average gamer aware of this thing, the most common response is that, now, people who are hardware enthusiasts, people who have been building PCs for a long time, probably not going to like what I'm about to repeat from what I heard from the gamers. But when I show gamers this graphics card, like when I point this out, that something like this exists, and then I talk about the price point, the most common response from the average gamer, PC gamer, not a console gamer, not a mobile gamer, a PC gamer, you know what they want? This is the response when they hear about something like the Titan. I wish we could get rid of actual PC gaming and go to cloud gaming. I wish cloud gaming was here right now and fix the latency issue. Because I would rather pay Microsoft or whoever a subscription for cloud gaming. Like, that is the response. Now, that is the worst response, but that is the most common response that I hear from the average gamer when I make them aware that their 5070 or their 5070 Ti that they just spent a lot of money on is a peasant level graphics card. Now, maybe that's not very nice of me to say that to them because I make them aware of something like this, because then they realize how small and insignificant their 5070 actually is in the grand scheme of things. But their response after that is like, I hate PC gaming. The reality is I hate having to buy computer hardware, and I wish that we could do cloud gaming. Like, I literally wish that we could just go to cloud gaming. Like, that's what the response is. They just kind of like, they concede. It's like, I hate NVIDIA. They're too expensive. I wasted all this money on a 5070 just to learn that it's pathetic compared to something else from the same vendor, in this case, NVIDIA. Like, they're basically, you know what? Okay, some responses that I get don't make any sense, but I understand why they say what they say, even though it's completely irrational or it shows lack of understanding of the hardware market or how chips work. But when I tell people that this exists, another response is, I hate NVIDIA. They're so greedy. I wish they would just sell the Blackwell Titan for like $400. Why can't they just sell it for $400? They're so greedy. They're a terrible company. Like, that is the other response that I get. You know, like, it's like NVIDIA is evil, or I wish PCs would go away and we could just do cloud gaming. This is the gamer, guys. This is the typical gamer, like, not a tech enthusiast, not someone who understands technology. That is the response. The response is, I don't like NVIDIA. I don't even want a PC upgrade. I just want cloud gaming, or NVIDIA is trash. Like, that is typically what gamers say. No, these are PC gamers. These guys they don't even have PlayStation 5s. They call themselves true PC gamers. True PC gamers. Well, I point out to them better value alternatives, but they don't really listen. So it's like, okay, whatever. Those are the PC gamers. The average PC gamer. Now, console gamers are completely different. Because I interact with console gamers, I interact with PC gamers. To be honest, I find, now I'm not trying to, like, no offense to any particular gamer, in any particular group of gamer, but in interacting with PC gamers, interacting with console gamers, interacting with mobile gamers are people who play, like, on phones. They mostly play, like, gacha games. So I feel like, now this is not representative of, like, the entire different gamer demographics, but in general, what I have found is that the average gamer who plays on PC seems like HDZ was saying, or someone in the chat was saying, they have kind of like ego problems, or they're more likely to. They're more, not everyone, not all of them. I'm not saying like the whole PC gaming group is like this, but they tend to have like ego problems, or they're more prone to suffering from egotistical outlooks on things. So, meaning when you put them in their place, like, we'll use an example. If someone buys an RTX 5070, and then you point out to them that their graphics card is mid-range, and they're saying that, no, it's not, it's like high-end, and you're like, no, it's not high-end, a 5070 is not high-end. And they're like, yes, it is, because it's so expensive. And I'm like, okay, if you tell them you spent $600, your graphics card's mid-range, and they're like, no, $600 is a lot of money. This is a high-end graphics card, period. You know, like, that's kind of the response. So you can either leave it at that, or you can make them aware. You can open their eyes. You know, like Verso, or maybe Renoir said in Expedition 33, see things as they are, not as you want them to be. So you open their eyes and you make them aware that their graphics card is less than 50% of the Blackwell Titan. Then they can't really argue with that, because this is like reality. Actually, no, that's not even the 5070. The 5070 is less than 40% of the Blackwell Titan. It's so weak. It isn't even close. It's like the PC gamer thought that they could take on Frieza. They thought that they were Goku, and they thought they could fight Frieza. But in reality, they only had the power level of Krillin. They didn't stand a chance. They would have just gotten blown up by Frieza's hand. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they try to go up against Frieza. Like, completely outclassed. No idea the reality of the real world. You basically teach them about the real world, and they're like, they don't know. So like some gamers their response is to close in and become defensive, and say Nvidia's greedy. I hate them. I hate Nvidia. I hate them so much. They're such a trash company. They're so evil. They're so greedy. They're an example of everything that's wrong with capitalism, blah, blah, blah. Like, they'll go off on some ridiculous tangent, whatever, get it out of the system, who cares, whatever. You know, like, that's one response that I've noticed. And this is from, like, talking to multiple PC gamers, not just one. I'm giving you guys, like, kind of, like, clearly recognizable patterns of behavior, if you will. The other response I get is, cloud gaming can't get here fast enough. I wish we could be rid of these stupid gaming PCs and just have cloud connectivity and be in the future. Live in a world where there's AI. Just let AI do everything. We don't need to own computers. We don't need to own all this stuff. This stuff is pointless. Like, there's no reason to own it because it's going to become obsolete every couple of years. It's like how an iPhone gets replaced every year by another iPhone. You know, like, that's another typical response. It's like cloud gaming, man. Cloud gaming. Or if not cloud gaming, a way to access gaming that's easy. Because, like, the example I get is like, well, like, because if you try to tell them, well, you don't own anything. Like, you don't actually own your games anymore if it's, like, cloud-based. Because it's like, it's all, you know, it's owned by whoever's hosting the cloud service. Whether that's Microsoft or whoever. Or GeForce Now. You know, like, and the response is, well, do we really need to? Like, who still watches Blu-ray movies on their actual Blu-ray disc? You know, like, everyone live streams. Everyone streams videos from Netflix, from Hulu, from, you know, like, FX or whatever. Like, everyone streams. You don't need to own movies. No one owns any movies anymore. Why do you need to own video games? What about live service games? So that's a very common, like, response that I hear from gamers, is that it's like, yeah, physical media is nice to have, but it doesn't matter because it's all going to the cloud anyway, and it's more convenient, and you don't need to spend all this money on an expensive computer and all this other stuff. You know, like, that's basically a very common response from the average PC gamer. Now I'll tell you about console gamers. Console gamers are completely different. The average console gamer, they are definitely way more into, like, physical things, if that makes sense. So like they still value physical games, like collecting physical games. Like, even if they still buy some games digitally, or maybe even more than 50% of their gaming library is digital, they still like to buy, like, their favorite franchises. So, like, for example, like, Death Stranding 2, I'll give you guys an example using Death Stranding 2, because Death Stranding 2 literally came out today. So the physical games have collector's editions.
To be frank, this kind of behavior is fueled by bigger YouTubers who use these brokey sentiments to farm views. Gamers Nexus and A890 are the worst of them all. I have unsubscribed to both of them.
Really? See, I don't know if it's really... I don't think I would say that Gamers Nexus and Der Bauer are fueling that kind of behavior, though. Like, I don't think Gamers Nexus is in favor of cloud gaming, if that makes sense. The fact that Der Bauer and Gamers Nexus are hardware enthusiasts, they like to talk about the physical hardware. Like, they make a lot of content on physical hardware. I don't see those type of channels as, like, wishing or hoping that eventually those hardware devices will go away or no longer be relevant, like, because everything will move to the cloud. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't see those channels that way. I kind of see them the opposite. Like, I think that they're not fueling the mentality of becoming, like, anti-NVIDIA or large company that makes computer hardware. I don't really see... now, to your point on... I can see why, like, when something controversial happens with a hardware company... You know, like, for example, with ASRock and the motherboards recently, you're saying hatred to NVIDIA? They seek victimhood? I don't know if I see them that way. Like, I don't... This is the first that this has actually been brought to my attention. GN ain't telling nobody to buy a 5090. Well, yeah, but I don't think that's the point, though. Like, okay, the point of making someone aware of this is not to tell them to buy this. That's not what the point of this is. The point is to show them that this is the pinnacle of computer hardware today. So they have to have the correct mindset, knowing that when they're buying into this hobby, this is kind of the upper limit. This is the upper bound of what is possible. That's the point. And the reaction always seems to be very, like, surprised, very negative. Not negative. That's too strong of a word, but just very like, oh, what? Why are they holding it out? Why are they holding this back? Like, why can't we get access to this? Why do they charge so much money? You know, that's just because of misunderstanding of like how chip design works, like how yields work from the fab, from TSMC, for example. So, you know, like, but the whole thing about like cloud gaming, oh, I wish like cloud gaming would replace, you know, physical gaming or client-based gaming. Like that kind of response was something that I did not expect. I did not expect that. Now, not everybody says that. Some people, you know, there's a lot of people that will say, no, the latency problem. But they're not talking about latency. They're not talking about cloud gaming today. They're saying they wish cloud gaming fixes the latency problem and then we don't need this expensive hardware anymore. That's what they're saying. That's the message. That's the response. Not, oh, you know, like, I want to do cloud gaming because I don't have to spend money on an expensive graphics card. Like they're not saying they want to do cloud gaming now because it's not feasible now. Like there's too much latency. They're aware of that. They're just wishing that it wasn't that way. That's what they're saying. That seems to be a pretty common thing, but to me it also depends on who you're talking to, because I feel like in general, the older gamers understand like how things were in the past. So they understand, you know, and they also understand ownership, owning the games, which is very much lost with digital games. This is okay. Now I remember what I wanted to say about console gamers. Console gamers are very much into collecting. They like the physical products, even though most of them are also buying digital games now. Like they're just downloading the game off of like PSN or, you know, Nintendo's store or whatever. So hence the reason why there was a mad rush for those, you know, these memory express cards. The memory express cards, the 1 terabyte memory express for the Switch 2, these are like super hard to get nowadays. They're kind of impossible to find right now. That's the reason why. It's because people wanted the digital games on the Switch 2. Not the people who need the physical disc, because the physical cartridge. But then there's the whole controversy about Nintendo's key cards. That's like a whole nother discussion. But the point that I've noticed, the trends are PC gamers don't really think about ownership and what that means. Like owning the game as like you purchase the game, it's yours. Because when you buy a game off of Steam, you're not like, okay, yes, technically you bought the game, but really what you've bought is a right to use or an RTU license key from Steam to give you access to that game through the Steam service. That is what you've purchased. Versus if you buy a game like a physical disc from GameStop or wherever for a PlayStation 5 game of the exact same game, you actually have the physical game. Now, a bunch of people are going to be like, well, what about the fact that you have to download all the DLC, you have to download all the fixes, the bug fixes, the patches, all that stuff, you know, like that is true. And that's the reason why that is kind of an argument in favor of digital media But at the very least, hypothetical scenario, if we get hit by an EMP shockwave from like the Terrans from the future or whatever, from StarCraft, and all of our technology, the internet gets taken off grid, we basically go into the Death Stranding world. Like if that actually were to happen tomorrow, you'd still be able to take your PS5 disc, fire it up locally. Now you're not gonna be able to connect to the internet, but you can still at least play the game, like a single player game, offline. Technically, you could still fire up like Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3 on the PS4 or the PS5, and you could still play those games like offline. They would work, but all the live service games would be gone. No more World of Warcraft. No more Final Fantasy 14. Those games are gone, up and gone. Goodbye Genshin Impact. Goodbye PUBG. Goodbye Fortnite. All those games are completely gone if that were to happen. So the gaming industry is an interesting one to talk about because it is a very kind of like a weird mix of, you've got physical media still, you have all digital media, you have digital versions of physical media games. It's like all this mix of stuff. It's kind of like how the movie industry was 15 years ago. Like back when, or maybe, like 15 years ago, when Netflix was up and coming, and, you know, streaming was not very feasible for most people because a lot of people didn't have like better than, you know, broadband 7 megabit internet in those times. Some people had fiber internet, but, you know, most people didn't. So streaming services like Netflix weren't really a thing 15 years ago. So physical media and like cable and all these older technologies, they still had their place. That's not true anymore. Okay, well, I don't even know how we got off to this tangent. This is a really weird tangent, but I think it was an interesting discussion. I don't even know how we started talking about this. We were talking about, what were we even talking about? We were talking about graphics cards. Oh, we were talking about the RTX 5050 and how it's going to be trash. But most tech enthusiasts wouldn't even consider an RTX 5050 in the first place. I remember what I was saying. The original message was that people who buy the best graphics cards upgrade more frequently than people who buy the graphics cards at the opposite end of the spectrum. So the lower end your graphics card is, the longer you typically keep it. The higher end your graphics card is, the shorter duration you keep it, the more frequently you upgrade. It sounds backwards, but it is actually true. And NVIDIA knows this. That's why they didn't even bother to compare the 5050 to a, like a 4060, 4050, 4050 type, whatever the mobile thing, Max Q, whatever it was that they put out there in the mobile market. Is the 5050 worse than Switch 2? I don't think so. The Switch 2 is an RTX 2050. This is the Switch 2. The Switch 2 is using Maxwell. Yeah, not Maxwell, Ampere. So it's GA107. So this is the Switch 2. Although it has more VRAM than this. I think it has 12 gigs of RAM. This is what it is though. So the 5050, according to NVIDIA, we're not going to be able to see it on here because it's not out yet. But what I can do is, here's 3050. 3050 is 78% faster. The 3050 desktop is 78% faster than the Switch 2. So no, the 5050 will be faster. It'll probably be 90% faster than the Switch 2. The RTX 5050. Oh, okay, that was something that I did want to touch on. Yeah, let me find that. There was an article about that. There was more than one article about that, actually. And these guys, WCCF Tech has like the worst search feature. So let me go find it from Tech Power Up, because the Tech Power Up did have something about the memory micro SD Express. I saw it earlier. Oh, here's one of them. AGI launches the high-speed micro SD Express, offering up to 800 megabytes per second read and 700 megabytes write, powered by a PCIe Gen 3 X1 interface with NVMe protocol. This is the reason why you cannot use micro SD cards with the Nintendo Switch 2. You have to use an Express because it utilizes NVMe. It's literally, the Switch 2 is using PCIe NVMe technology. And the older micro SD does not do that. So think of it like old school micro SD is more like SATA or SATA. New micro SD Express is basically like an M.2 SSD. So yeah, there's more companies. So it looks like AGI is doing a 128, a 256, and a 512. In other news, DDR4 is now more expensive than DDR5. I was wondering when this was going to happen. This was inevitable because anytime this happens, this signifies that we truly have moved beyond DDR4. So now anyone on DDR4 is considered on an old PC, because when the older memory becomes more expensive than the newer memory, it means that manufacturing of the older memory, in this case DDR4, has basically shut down, not completely shut down, but it has been reduced so much that the demand for DDR4 is significantly lower. There was another article on Memory Express, if I can find it. Oh, what is this? This is like a new gaming handheld. Asus Clinical. AverMedia unveils 2 new HDMI capture devices for creators at every level. So they've got a Nintendo Switch 1. I don't know what's going on. This is like such a fake picture because they've got the Nintendo Switch like Joy-Cons. They've got the AverMedia device here. They've got some tablet that is definitely not a Switch in dock mode. It's some Android tablet. And then they've got like what looks like a Mac stand and Logitech mouse and keyboard. Wireless Logitech mouse and keyboard. And then there's just some rando Xbox Series X controller just sitting there. Even though that's probably what you would use to control the game in here, not this. And this isn't even a game. It looks like they're just doing AI art. Like, what the heck? All right, speaking of the micro SD Express, here we go. Team Group unveils the Apex SD 7.1 micro SD Express card. So, a global leader in memory solutions, Team Group officially announced the launch of this micro SD Express card today. Designed to meet the next gen. Okay, again, it's up to 800 megabytes. So, it's basically the same spec as the GameStop one that I'm using. Yeah, the GameStop one, this is the legit GameStop one that I'm personally, this is a 1 terabyte that I have. This one's 800 megabytes per second. So it's basically, they're all about the same. I bet they're all probably the same SanDisk OEM. So, yeah, same exact thing. All right, these guys are doing 128 gigabytes, 256, 512, and the highly sought after 1 terabyte capacity. Okay, it also, wait a minute, with the highest capacity storing up to 30 games. Yeah, that's good. 30 game. I don't know what their average size is, but yeah, if you stick a bunch of Switch 1 games in there, you can get way more than 30 games. It also supports video class speed V30, 4K UHD video recording. Well, obviously, because it's backwards compatible, making it ideal for that. Okay, so there's another option. This is the sort of one that I would expect Micro Center to have, because Micro Center sells Team Group memory. Newegg might get this one in stock. But if you're someone who has a Switch 2 and you're looking for a 1 terabyte micro SD Express, check your local GameStop. GameStop should get restocks for the 1 terabyte that has their brand on it. And it's basically a SanDisk OEM. So this is a legit good one. I mean, this is what I'm personally using. It's the GameStop 1 terabyte. And it works fine. I got like a ton of games on my Switch 2. So, and we'll probably revisit the Switch. We're definitely going to revisit the Switch 2 next month for Donkey Kong Bonanza. So there will be more Switch 2 coverage on this channel. But in the meantime, it's back to PlayStation 5 Pro for Death Stranding 2. Yeah, see, I consider myself someone, it doesn't matter what platform, like, if I want to play the game, I'm going to play the game. So if it's PlayStation 5, we're going to be on PlayStation 5. If it's on the Switch 2, we're going to be on Switch 2. If it's on PC, we're on PC. We cover it all. The game just has to reach a certain, like, minimum, what I call internally the minimum quality level. It has to be of a certain quality level for me to be able to feature it on stream. You went, what? You went with 9070 XT. Yeah, I think 9070 XT is still the best GPU for value this year.
I envy you. A 1 terabyte card is 2/3 the price of the Switch 2 here. I only got a 512 gigabytes card.
Yeah, I pre-ordered mine. So, do you guys remember back when the Switch 2 pre-orders were going to happen? I pre-ordered mine before you could pre-order the Switch 2. So I got in way early. Like, way early. And I actually announced it. I announced it on a couple of live streams. I told people who were interested in the Switch 2, so you may have not watched the stream at the time. It was one of those gaming streams. I can't remember which one. It might have been Monster Hunter Wilds. But I remember telling people, you know, like, public service announcement, get your 1 terabyte. If you want a Switch 2 or if you plan on getting a Switch 2, I said probably like 2 different live streams. I told people, you know, like, if you can pre-order a 1 terabyte micro SD Express, definitely do it now. Don't wait, because I knew that would happen. This sort of stuff always happens. Last year, when the PS5 Pro was up, do you guys remember last year? What was it, like the 30-year PS5 Pro bundle thing? You guys remember this? Who here remembers this? You guys remember this thing? When people were all trying to, like, buy this thing, pre-order this thing, whatever, and people were going crazy for this, back when people were flipping out, going crazy, I was telling people, if you're going to get a PS5 Pro, regardless of whether it's the 30th anniversary edition or the regular one, you need to buy the disk drive now. And that was literally like 2 to 3 months before the PS5 Pro came out. Because I knew that the disk drive, the Blu-ray, the HD 4K Blu-ray drive, was going to sell out instantly. So I was telling people on stream, if you truly plan on getting a PS5 Pro, get the disk drive way before the actual launch. because I did that. You know what's funny? I feel like I remember this. Digital Foundry, Rich from Digital Foundry, the day after I said that, Rich from Digital Foundry, he didn't say me specifically, but he said that there was a YouTuber. I think he said, I forgot the exact phrase, but he said there was like a YouTuber or somebody was saying, he was basically saying that he was telling, I think it was John on their weekly show that they do every Monday, I think, or Sunday. He was like, one of the YouTubers was telling people to get to buy the disk drive. So he was like, I as soon as I heard him say that, I went on Amazon and I ordered the disk drive. So he got the disk drive. I don't know if he was referring to me specifically, but as far as I know, I was the only one saying that. Like, to my knowledge, no one was thinking about the disk drive. They were all like talking about the 30th anniversary collector's edition, blah, blah, blah. And when everyone was talking about this, I was like, buy the disk drive now, because you're not going to be able to in like a month. And sure enough, literally like a week. So, because when they were talking about that, when Digital Foundry was talking about that, I think John went on the website, like on Amazon. He tried to go and see if he could buy one. He was like, yeah, they're already, he's like, it's all wish list only now. So there was a run on the disk drives. So, because see, that's the thing. Like, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that the disk drives were going to immediately sell out as soon as the PS5 Pro was announced. And then the pre-order date was given. I knew that was going to happen. And it happened literally like a couple of days after I was telling people to buy the disk drive if you're someone who is going to buy a PS5 Pro. So I made the public service announcement, and sure enough, it's gone. Likewise, the 1 terabyte, I kept telling people, go get pre-order the GameStop or wherever you are in the world. I know, like in Hong Kong, for example, you guys don't have GameStop. So whatever hardware store, if they allow you to take pre-orders, if they take pre-orders for stuff like a microSD Express, 1 terabyte, definitely get that in, because the price of these things is way higher than what it was months ago, like half a year ago. So, and it's gonna have an elevated price for a pretty long time until supply catches up with demand. That always happens when there's new technology. You didn't buy a PS5 because you wanted the Pro, and then when the Pro came out, you didn't want to spend about $800 on it. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens when the Xbox Ally gets announced with the pricing, because that's not going to be a cheap handheld. Considering the price of the ROG Ally X, imagine what the Xbox Ally X is going to be. Probably the same price. Or maybe plus or minus $50, depending on what Microsoft wants to do. But to me, I kind of see the Switch 2 as a bargain in this day and age, considering how expensive everything is. Like, the Xbox Series X actually went up in price, if I'm not mistaken, by like $100, and like no one can buy one anymore. So there's rumors going around that Microsoft like stopped production or severely lowered the manufacturing of the Xbox Series X due to demand being so low. It's weird. It's almost like the $1,000 price point is going to become a new reality for a lot of things. And I don't like saying that, but that's where I see things going. Like AMD, for example, the 6900 XT, AMD's RDNA 2 flagship from the pandemic. This was a $1,000 MSRP graphics card back in December of 2020. So AMD, prior to that, AMD never charged anywhere close to $1,000 for a consumer desktop graphics card. But I knew when AMD did this that there's no turning back. AMD is literally now following in NVIDIA's footsteps because NVIDIA started charging $1,000 in 2013 with the original GTX Titan. The very first Titan from NVIDIA, the GTX Titan, from February 19th, 2013, was $999 US. Think about that. So if we take the inflation calculator, 900 USD dollars in 2013 worth today, let's see. So if we take inflation according to dollartimes.com, $1,000 in 2013 is almost $1,400 in 2025. It's about $1,373 according to Dollar Times. So it's about $1,400. So you tack on $400 after a little more than 12 years. So think about that. If NVIDIA was charging what is today $1,400 for their flagship graphics card, now they're charging $2,000 MSRP for the RTX 5090. So I knew when AMD started charging $1,000 for their flagship graphics card, it was only a matter of time that we're going to be moving into this higher price point across the board. Because if AMD and NVIDIA are charging $1,000 or more, that's the new reality. And there's really nothing the gamers can do about it. Oh, what are the gamers going to do? Not buy it? What are they going to do? They're just going to not buy the 5090? They're not going to buy the 7900 XTX? If that were the case, we would have seen the price fall already. But that's not the case. The reality is there's tons and tons of gamers spending that much money on these graphics cards. Now, next year, AMD will launch the successor to the current flagship, the RX 7900 XTX. This graphics card will have remained in power for so long. It will be, I gotta think about this, it'll be 3 years old this fall. Which means when its true successor arrives a year from this fall, so fall Q4 2026. So if you're someone who wants to see a graphics card from AMD that will be faster than an RTX 5090, remember the date, remember that range, Q4 2026. That is your range. That is when it's going to happen. You will see the AMD RTX 6090 equivalent. What is that, like a year and a half from now? So it's a year and a half away from now. So it'll compete directly with the RTX 6090. But what I'm saying is you can expect that graphics card is going to cost more than $1,000. Meaning AMD did not raise the price from RDNA 2 to RDNA 3. They stayed at $1,000 in December of 2022. That was more than 2 years ago. This GPU is more than 2 years old. But because it is less than 3 years old, it is still considered right up there as best in class. Even if it is technically not the latest generation, it is still best in class. Similarly, the RTX 40 series best in class is still best in class because they're still less than 3 years old. You know, once a graphics card becomes 3 years old, it is no longer best in class. And I want to emphasize, it doesn't matter when someone bought the graphics card. It is from the day the card was first available, meaning the launch day is the birthday of the graphics card. And once it hits 3 years of age, it is no longer best in class. It doesn't matter if there is a replacement or not. It is no longer best in class once it hits that magic 3-year mark. This is why a lot of people skip a generation, because they'll fall into like 4 years on their upgrade cycle, meaning their GPU will at least no longer be best in class, because if they upgrade and it's less than 3 years old, they're wasting money, or they're literally someone who upgrades every generation because they are a true tech enthusiast. Safi's saying start saving now. Yeah, start saving now, because the true successor to the XTX is going to be way more than $1,000. If the 5090 is $2,000, the new AMD card is definitely going to be faster than the 5090. So now I don't think it'll be $2,000, but we'll see. We'll see where it will end up. So I don't know. Hold on. Let me see. Should I show this? Let me find this real quick. I guess I can, because this is technically AMD's publicly visible info. Let me find the exact thing here. Yeah, okay. So, wait, no, that's not what I wanted to show. Where is it? Yeah, this is it. Okay, so I will share this briefly. How do I... Full screen? Okay. Okay, I'm going to share this briefly. This is kind of like a secret... This is like a sneak peek. This is a sneak peek. Alright. So, AMD is going to announce recently, or they've already announced, depending on your access levels to AMD, but AMD announced very recently the AMD Instinct MI400 series graphics cards. These are holistically designed to deliver leadership performance numbers. So, coming next year, it literally says available in 2026, next year. These are the data center GPUs. So this is meant to compete not with Blackwell. This is to go beyond NVIDIA's Blackwell. This is going to compete with, I think it's Rubin or whatever the next one is for NVIDIA. So 40 petaflops of FP4, 20 petaflops of FP8. 432 gigabytes of VRAM. And this is HBM4. This is Gen 4 HBM. This is way beyond GDDR7 even. The memory bandwidth is 19.6 terabytes per second. 300 gigabytes per second of scale-out bandwidth per GPU. So this sort of thing is a hint of AMD's true power level that's coming soon. So the way I see it, to use another DBZ reference, AMD is currently in the hyperbolic time chamber training. So when, what was the name of the guy who took over after Raja? I keep forgetting his name. What's the name of the guy who's in charge of the Radeon group at AMD? The Vietnamese guy, the Vietnamese American, what's his name? I keep wanting to say Jack Ma, but I know his name is not Jack Ma. It's like some other name. Like, what is that guy's name? No. That's the Intel CEO. AMD. Is it Jack Wynn? No. Who is the AMD Radeon? What is the name of the guy? Man, how do I not remember the guy's name? Jack Wynn? Yeah, Jack Wynn. Yeah. Jack Wynn. General Manager of Client Radeon. Yeah, he's the one who said all this. So, last year, was it last year or was it this year? Oh, no, it was this year. It was a 9070 XT launch. What am I thinking? It was literally March of this year. Or it was like CES. It was January of this year. How am I getting all these dates mixed up? Okay. Jack Wynn, back at CES in January, he announced the RX 9070 XT and the RX 9070. And people misinterpreted his words when he said, like, at the time, we are not going to compete directly with NVIDIA's best. So a lot of people were like, oh, a lot of people took that to mean, oh, AMD's getting out of high performance GPUs. They're not going to compete with NVIDIA. The people who say that are the people who are probably trying to, I don't know what the motive is. It could just be like they completely misinterpret like how businesses work and they know nothing of product development. I took that as, oh, that's literally when Goku instant transmissioned to go and save Tien from half Cell after he absorbed Android 17. In this case, Cell is NVIDIA and Goku is AMD Radeon in this analogy. And he's basically telling Cell, give me, what did he say? Like 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever he said. Give me some time. I need more time. And Cell's like, no, we will fight now. And then he like tried to charge at Goku, and then Goku instant transmissioned out with Tien. And then Cell's like, whoa, that's a really cool trick. Basically, Jack Wynn pulled a Goku in the Cell saga, where they're like, we need more time. We need to go and do some training in the hyperbolic time chamber. So basically what's going on, and people, the average PC gamers have no knowledge of this. They have no idea what AMD is cooking up right now as we speak, because the MI400 was announced to deliver leadership performance in the data center for like AI GPU model inferencing and training and all that stuff. The reality is really it's the training that needs this. This can support over 100 billion parameter AI models. So this is proof that they are nowhere near done with building like super duper high-end graphics cards. Like they are fully committed to building mega performance, super high-end, baller 4K, ray tracing, all that stuff, frame gen here, there, everywhere. You know, all that stuff is coming next year. Available 2026. So this is kind of a teaser. Now, just to put things into perspective, the AI compute performance, this is the compute performance. So this is not tessellation performance, this is AI compute performance. But the numbers that they're showing, they don't actually give any hard number here, but you can see this is basically the same sort of graph that Lisa Su showed when they were talking about Ryzen. For those of you that remember, back when AMD had the FX 8350, they had like Bulldozer, Steamroller, Pile Driver, Excavator, all those. I think that was in the wrong order. It was Bulldozer in 2011, Pile Driver in 2012, Steamroller in like, I think 2015, an Excavator in 2016, and then Ryzen was 2017. But remember when Lisa Su showed the graph, and basically it was like, oh, this, the top one here, the big one way up there, if the mouse will show, Yeah, here we go. So MI400, this is kind of like Ryzen, and down here was like excavator, and you had like pile driver or bulldozer down here. This would be like FX8350, FX8150, and then you had whatever the excavator APU was, and then bam, all of a sudden you had Ryzen. It was like so much faster than their old FX series. This is kind of what AMD is hinting at with their compute performance for the upcoming graphics generation. So this new thing is going to be like a big deal for AMD next year. So the year of 2026 is going to be a really big year for the Radeon Technology Group, or whatever they call themselves these days. So if you're someone who is enthusiastic about graphics cards, and you're not super happy about how things were this year, because this year, pretty much, there was the 5090, and it was, like, stupidly expensive, and then there was, like, no supply, and then there was the other NVIDIA cards, which were basically all a joke, and then you had the 9070 XT, which was a good graphics card, probably the best graphics card of the year. That one might actually win GPU of the year from, like, all the big tech media channels. And rightfully so. If I had to grade all the graphics cards that I've tested this year, including the 5090, I would definitely say 9070 XT is the winner, for sure, in terms of the value. So so there's that, and then there was the 9070, and then there was like the lesser, 9060 XT and all the other NVIDIA slop. So you've got a bunch of those cards that people aren't super enthusiastic about. I mean, that's why we had somebody on one of the Death Stranding 2 streams asking in the chat, I think it was Tuesday night, we had someone in the chat saying, should I buy a 3080 Ti or a 4070 Super? And I was thinking, like, why those cards? Unless they're thinking of buying a used card? Why not buy like a 5070, or better yet, why don't you buy a 9070? Because that's like way better than both of those cards, and it's brand new and has full warranty, and it has more VRAM. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah. But that shows you the average gamer doesn't actually know what is in the market these days. Like, they have no idea. So, because a lot of people watching this live stream are tech enthusiasts. You guys you guys have a way above average understanding of the PC component market compared to the average gamer. But a lot of people who ask questions on the tech channel, on these live streams, they are asking in favor of like just a gaming PC upgrade, and they have no idea like what's the best value. So for sure. Next year is gonna be like way different from this year in terms of, it's gonna be way more exciting. Let's put it that way. I'll leave it at that. Next year is gonna be a far more exciting year for those who are enthusiastic about graphics cards, because AMD and NVIDIA are changing up the market. They are going to deliver in different ways. NVIDIA is going into AI and all that stuff. AMD is chasing after them with the MI400. It's going to be the Cell games. It's going to be Rockin' versus CUDA in the developer space. It's going to be RTX 6090 versus Goku from AMD in the fall, in Q4 of next year. UDNA, if that's what it's going to be called, UDNA versus the 6090. So we're going to be looking at a clash of the true titans next year. You heard it here first. But the reason why I can say that with full confidence is because, I've seen these numbers, and I've seen how AMD's hardware performs in the data center. And Rockham is like going full cylinders, full speed ahead right now. They're firing on all cylinders with the developers. So right now, this year, it's all about outreach to get some buy-in from developers. Next year, you're going to start seeing everything start coming together. So yeah, you're going to see the results of training in the hyperbolic time chamber. You don't just go away from the GPU space for like 2 or 3 years. In this case, it'll have almost been 4 years. I can't believe it'll have been 4 years. Can you believe that? 4 years. The 7900 XT will have been AMD's flagship graphics card for 4 years. When its successor, almost 4 years. When its success, maybe it'll be 4, maybe it'll be even be more than 4 years. But the fact that this graphics card went beyond 3 year, beyond the 3-year limit, you don't just go away for 4 years and don't come back with anything big. That's all I'm saying. And we'll leave it at that. So, next year will be a very exciting year for the tech community because next year will be, not only will there be a whole bunch of GPUs, there will be a whole bunch of CPUs. Zen 6 and the return of Intel. So they're all coming in next year. Everything next year is going to be just as crazy as 2022. And that leads us into the paint segue. So we actually do get to show paint this stream. I wasn't expecting to do paint. Okay. But I guess we can do it. So we have 2022, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and next year. So let's think about this. Let's do CPU and GPU. So what did we get in 2022? AM5, Zen 4. We got LGA, or, well, LGA 1700 wasn't really new. But I guess we can say LGA 1700. Or what I can say is Raptor Lake. We got Raptor Lake in 2022. In the form of the 13th gen. Yes, the 13th gen is that old, believe it or not. It is a 2022 product. So you had Zen 4 and Raptor Lake in the CPU world, and then you had RTX 40, and you had the RDNA 3. That's how old these products were. They were 2022. Oh, you're right, I did. $2026. So remember, anyone who understands how companies work will know, especially if it's a tech company like these, you will know that these products have roughly 24 months of relevancy. Whatever. I mistyped that, so whatever. They have 24 months of relevancy from a company's standpoint, meaning they consider these current gen for 2 years. Meaning every 2 years you can expect a replacement. You do not need to rely on hardware leaks to know this. All you have to do is rely on history. If you understand history, if you're a historian of technology, you don't need to look at leaks because you automatically can predict with high statistical accuracy of when the replacement will come out. So I can predict that Zen 5 will come out sometime in 2024. And I said this back in 2022 and in 2023. There are literal live streams of me declaring these things. And when did Zen 5 come out? AKA Ryzen 9000. 2024. AM5 Zen 5 was August of last year. It's almost 1 year old. And then we had Intel's Arrow Lake, introduction of the new Intel. Every 2 years, you have the new. Notice this. What did Intel put out in 2023? They did something special. They did Raptor Lake Slop, or Raptor Lake Plus, we'll say. AKA 14th gen, AKA just a rehash of Raptor Lake. So that one is kind of like, you know, whatever. So the reality is every 2 years, you get the new thing. So what does that mean? If you don't believe me, when did Zen 3 come out? I'll give you a hint. It was a pandemic year. And when was the previous Intel? Oh, Intel went panic mode. So you had 2 Intels launched in the exact same year. That's why they kind of messed themselves up. So Intel's a little bit less predictable because of that. However, Intel, one thing you can predict with Intel is that Intel will release a new product every single year. This is with very few exceptions. And this might be an exception year, but I don't know yet. Intel historically will release a product every year because their shareholders demand it. So in the case of 2023, they put out Raptor Lake Refresh because they didn't have their new socket ready. What happened in 2021? They put out Alder Lake. What happened they also put out Rocket Lake. Because technically, so here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. 14th gen was never supposed to exist. The original time frame, if we are to remove these, oops, oh boy. Well, okay, hold on. Let's this is going to mess things up. So I'll just leave this here. Let me just leave all of it here. You know what I'll do? I'll use a different color. So Intel's original timeline was supposed to be, we'll just say, Intel's original plan was in 2021, Rocket Lake was supposed to be 2021. In 2022, they were supposed to have Alder Lake. In 2023, they were supposed to have Raptor Lake. And in 2024, they would have been back on schedule with Arrow Lake to their schedule, the regular scheduled programming. Now, things got messed up for Intel. Right here, they got jammed. They got jammed because of something called, and we'll put it in orange, Zen 3. Zen 3 came out in the latter half of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic. That was the year of everything, and now I regret not having 2020 on here because I think that illustrates the point a lot better. But 2020 was the magic year. That was called the year of AMD. Harvard Business Review in the future will write in the history books of the business for the MBA majors out there. There will be case studies looking at the economics of how AMD basically had a magical year in 2020, and it was in the pandemic year. They put out so much product. Think about it. They put out Zen 3, RDNA 2, PS5, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, and plus we'll leave it at that. All that stuff from AMD in 1 year. All of it. Crazy. Insane. No one normally can do that. Not only do you put out new CPUs that are world class and beat the competition in every objectable measurable metric. You also put out new console generations. You also put out a GPU that we were literally just talking about for the first time. It was that I used the Toy Story analogy from the movie Toy Story. When Woody's like, Buzz, you missed the truck. I'm not aiming for the truck. In this case, the truck is the RTX 3080. No one thought that AMD could beat the RTX 3080, let alone the RTX 2080 Ti back in 2020. This is a fact. No one thought it could happen. But not only did AMD defeat the 3080, they even went toe-to-toe with the 3090 while using significantly less electricity. So that's why 2020 is a magical year for AMD. And this is like, you almost never hear of this sort of thing happening in the tech world. Like, that sort of year for a company is so rare. It's so rare to witness for a tech company to be able to do that, to launch that many successful products that are all chart-topping and very competitive with their competitors. You literally fight a war on two fronts. You fight Intel to the east, you fight Nvidia in the west. And you're backing Sony and Microsoft as the arms dealer for their console war. No one else was in a position to be able to do that. Insanity. It was crazy. This is why that was the magical year, 2020. All in one year. Demon's Souls remaster. Anyway, that's unrelated. So you had Zen 3. Zen 3 was so good that it completely obliterated Intel's original plan. Intel went full panic mode, and you guys know what Intel panic mode means. Intel panic mode means you have to double launch. You have to tell everyone, pull this thing forward because the benchmarks of this are too strong. Because Intel launched Rocket Lake months after Zen 3. Rocket Lake is younger than Zen 3. Keep that in mind. 11th gen Intel is newer than the 5800X, the 5950X, by like half a year. So Rocket Lake was basically outclassed. We need to call in support, call in the next batch, call them in quick, bring them in, 12th gen, coming in fast. So 12th gen came in a whole year in advance. Alder Lake was supposed to go toe-to-toe with AMD's Zen 4. But Zen 3 was just too strong. The opposition was too strong. So they had to come in fast. 12th gen got pulled in early. That's why it launched along the launch of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker in the fall of 2021. Only like 2 quarters or less than 2 full quarters after Rocket Lake's disastrous launch in that same year. So remember, this is all during the pandemic. This is like during the dark times of computer hardware. This was when the 3060 Ti was like $900. And you had to use something like Newegg Shuffle to buy a graphics card and a bunch of other things that you didn't even need. Okay. So that was what happened. That was Intel's original plan. But that's not what happened with Intel. We already know. So hence the reason why the 14th gen exists. Because 13th gen was supposed to be a 2023 product. But it got pulled in early because the whole roadmap basically got shifted over by like 3 quarters or so. So that's why you have such a thing as a 14900K, and that's why a 14900K is nothing more than a 13900K. So it's basically Raptor Lake in disguise. It isn't even in disguise. That's literally what it is. So every 2 years, you get new things. So when did the RTX 50? So, okay, here's where things kind of break, though, a little bit. A little bit. Things went off track in the GPU space for both AMD and NVIDIA. And this is why I regret not putting 2020 on here. I'm actually kind of like, I kind of want to like redo this entire thing. Yeah, I want to just redo the whole thing because we should have 2020 on here. Just because it'll illustrate things a lot better. In fact, 2018 technically, but no, we'll just start with 2020. I don't want it to be too long. So we'll do 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. Maybe I should put 28. 20, well, hold on. Let's get these a little closer. 26, 27, and then we'll do 28. We'll go further out. Okay. So nearly a decade worth of computer hardware generations. So here we talked about this. And in this year we had Comet Lake and Zen 3 in 2020. So you had Intel, you had AMD. In 2021, you had Rocket. Okay, the Intel names are super long, so you know what? Maybe I'll just do 10th and Zen 3. Everyone knows what that means. In 2021, you had 11th and 12th, and then no AMD. In the GPU space, you had RTX 40. You had, well, okay, you had, well, hold on. I want to illustrate some. I want to illustrate the GPU one in detail. 4090, 4080, 7900 XTX, 7900 XT. And then you had the unlaunch. You had the unlaunch of the 4080 12, what is it? 12, yeah, the fake one, the fake 4080, which we all know what that gets rebranded to, but that was supposed to launch. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. What am I doing? I'm off by like 2 years. Whoops. So 2020, you had 3080. You had 3090. You had 6800 XT. You had 6900 XT. You had PS5. You had Xbox. You had Xbox Series X. You had Xbox Series S. I don't know why I'm putting these as GPU. So we're going to move them. We're going to create a new category. Consoles. Just because. Consoles. So, 2020, the magical year. Everything changed. You had a new Intel CPU on a new socket. You had a brand new socket from Intel. This was LGA 1200, launched in 2020 with the 10th gen Comet Lake CPU to do battle against AM4 in its 3rd generation. You had Ampere RTX 3080, gone in a flash for those trying to buy it. 3090, $1,500 MSRP, 8K BF GPU. You had 6800 XT. Goes toe-to-toe with 3080. Very impressive. No one expected it. Then you had the 6900 XT come out of nowhere to shock the world and put AMD back on the map as the only company capable of going directly toe-to-toe with NVIDIA in the graphics card world. And then you had a bunch of consoles come out. New console generation. In 2021, Intel panic mode activated. 11th gen and 12th gen, double launch, emergency, double launch. AMD, no response. Graphics cards, what did we get in 2021? We got 3070 Ti, 3080 Ti. What is it? LHR or L, whatever. Anyway, 3080 Ti, 3060 Ti, 3060. You also got the 6700 XT, the 6600 XT. You basically you get the mainstream stuff in the following year. You get all the other stuff. That wasn't 2021. We haven't gotten there yet. Now we enter 2022. In 2022...
Can you not talk about next year so soon? I am so exhausted after this upgrade cycle and I'm just having a sigh of relief, tears of joy.
We're getting there. We're getting there. But the thing is, for people to understand how to predict horror releases, they need to see the past to understand the future. So, but yeah, we're going to show when the new stuff is coming out. That's all going to be on this chart. So, in 2022, AMD launched a legendary CPU in, I think it was April or May. I think it was May or April of 2022. AMD launched the Ryzen 5800 X3D in Q2 of 2022. Yes, the 5800 X3D is from 2022. So it's not that old compared to Zen 3. We also got 3090 Ti. The infamous 3090 Ti. The 3090 Ti was the first graphics card to use the infamous 12-volt high power connector on the Founders Edition. Although NVIDIA, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they made it optional, but I think all the 3090 Ti's featured this connector with the additional circuitry. So that was 3090 Ti, was 2022. Wait, why am I putting, hold up. I just realized I'm putting this, okay. So you had Zen 3 X3D, the first ever X3D. But that's not all. There was also a new socket was introduced. Actually, I should put, well, let's not put the socket. Well, should we put the socket? Let's not put the socket for now. It's going to get too messy. So Zen 4 was introduced in Q3. At the end of Q3, Zen 4 was introduced. So the 5800 X3D launched 1 quarter ahead, or almost 2 quarters ahead of the Zen 4 launch. And then you also had 13th gen from Intel launch at the end of 2022. So you had Raptor Lake enter the scene in 2022. You also, in the GPU space, you had the 3090 Ti. You had the... Do we really need to put all the refreshes? Because there was also... 6950 XT, 6750 XT, 6650 XT. You had like, I think there were no Super 30 series. So you had like AMD Super equivalent, which is they put the 50 in the number, and that's basically what they do. So this is like the RDNA 2 Super, the Super Dupers showed up alongside the 3090 Ti. So then, however, there was the RTX 4090, the RTX 4080, the 7900 XTX, the 7900 XT. Now, I believe that's all that launched for the new stuff. And then you had all of these in the first half. So in the first half, you had these. In the second half, you had these. Notice the pattern that is starting to form. Now in 2023, what happened? In 2023, CPUs, you had Zen 4 X3D. And you had 14th gen. GPUs, you have all the other stuff. So you have 4070 Ti, 4070, 4060 Ti, 4060, and then the rest of the AMD stuff: 7800 XT, 7700 XT, 7600 XT. All of these, although you know the weird thing was, hold on. The order in which, the chronological order is kind of weird, because I think it was actually like that. The 7600 XT was not even in 2023, so yeah, that's right. It was like this. It was this stuff. Then, in 2024, so this brings us to last year. Last year was Zen 5 and Arrow Lake in the CPU space. And then I have to make some room here. So this one, in the GPU space, there was 4080 Super, 4070 Ti, what is it, Super, it's Ti Super, 4060 Super, 7600 XT. You had those. And then there's supposed to be a new generation of graphics cards. So we're supposed to get in the second half the 5090, the 5080. But we know that didn't happen. So the cycle for the GPUs kind of broke. Now, there was a console. There was PS5 Pro last year. So there was a console. There was a half-step generation for the consoles last year. So now, we come to this year. So this year, we got... So, okay, to point some things out, the X3D was kind of weird. Like, AMD wanted to crash. The only reason why 9800 X3D came out was because they wanted to crash the Arrow Lake. They wanted to basically halt any sort of momentum that Intel would have had competing directly with Zen 5. So the 9800 X3D launched way earlier than it was supposed to because they wanted to halt the momentum of Intel. And they successfully did. They literally, like... you know, pulled the wheels out from, or I guess, I don't know, whatever analogy you want to use. Intel was basically left dead in the water in, like, last winter because of 9800 X3D. So they launched it early. But so Zen 5 X3D is a 2025 product. Hence the 9950 X3D, the 9900 X3D, those are X3Ds. So you can notice that there is a pattern that has developed, meaning you get a Zen CPU. Then the following year, you get an X3D variant. Then the next year, you get the successor, Then the year after that, you get the X3D variant. So there's a pattern that's developing. Intel is very predictable. You get a new CPU. You get the next CPU. Then you get the next CPU. Then you get what's supposed to be another CPU. Then you get the next CPU. So Intel, basically, there's a new CPU every year. AMD, there is, for all intents and purposes, a new CPU every single year. So if you're on an odd numbered year, like in this year, 2025 is an odd numbered year, guess what? X3D is the king of that year. If you're on an even numbered year, the non-X3D is the new hotness. That's the latest thing on the even numbered year. So the CPUs are very predictable. The GPUs normally are very predictable. However, that is not the case with the most recent generation. The most recent generation kind of broke that cycle, but not really. Basically, what happened was NVIDIA was supposed to launch the 5090 and the 5080 in Q4 of last year. That was the original plan. However, they didn't do it. They stalled it into the first quarter of 2025. So now these GPUs are forced to be over here with the rest of the pack. And we're seeing all of that play out now. So we're seeing all of this. So basically, we're seeing it play out like this. So meaning your enthusiast class stuff is supposed to be on the even number because that's traditionally how it was. We look at 2020. Oh, look. We look at 2022. Oh, look again. See what I mean? So 2024. Oh, look. They're supposed to be here. But NVIDIA moved them over here by like 1 quarter. They delayed them by like a 90-day window. So you don't need any hardware leaks to predict when these things come out. At least the general window of when they come out. And then, of course, we had the Switch 2 this year for the consoles. So now we come to next year. Next year, we know for a fact that Zen 6 is coming. This is like an absolute certainty. Everyone knows this. I haven't looked at any leaks. I haven't looked at any leaked videos from other YouTube channels. I haven't even kept in the loop on Zen 6. But I know it's next year. Why? It's very simple. Because of this pattern. It's very easy. So Zen 6 is absolutely coming in the second half of next year. It's basically a little more than a year away. At this point, it's probably 16 months away from now, if I had to just randomly throw a number. So, or maybe even less than that, maybe 15, 14 months. Anyway, Q3, Q4 of next year is Zen 6. That is an absolute certainty. Next year, we're also getting something from Intel. Now, I don't know what Intel is going to do this year, but next year is supposed to be the Nova Lake, or whatever their new desktop platform is. I think it's Nova Lake. I don't know what Intel's going to do this year. I think this year is going to be Arrow Lake Plus. Basically, this year is a complete skip for Intel because it's basically the same as the 14th gen. So you guys remember, 14th gen was nothing more than Raptor Lake repeated. This is going to be a very similar event this year for Intel, where they're going to stall out and put the same product with a different name and market it as, optimizations, AI, AI and efficiency and AI and more like slight changes, tweaks to EMIB and voltage frequency. So that is basically what's coming out this year for Intel. So keep that in mind. I expect there to be something from Intel. I do not expect Intel to have absolutely nothing. If Intel does absolutely nothing, then it's basically like the year, what year is it's like 2016. It will be like 2016 all over again. Because the last time Intel put nothing in the market was 2016. Or no, not 2016. It was 2016. Because Skylake, if we go further out, I wish I could just like zoom this out and show 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. 2015 was Skylake, 6700K. i7 6700K was 2015. 2015, 10 years ago, was Intel Skylake. Then 2016, nothing. Then 2017, Intel launched 7th gen Kaby Lake. So if we do the Intel again, let's just say 2015, i7 6700K, 2016, nothing. 2017, i7 7700K. It's like, oh, TikTok, here we go. Here comes the slop. Here comes the yearly slop. Quad-core hyperthreading, quad-core hyperthreading, quad-core hyperthreading, more quad-core hyperthreading. Oh, no. Something approached. Why is this thing like this? It was like, panic, what's happening? Invader. It's like Dark Souls. It's like you're playing Dark Souls 3 and you get invaded by a PvPer and you're not ready. You're not ready. You fought all these mobs. You have no more Estus Flask. Someone's invading you. You're getting invaded. What the? You're at like 20% HP and you fought off an elite mob and an invader's coming in to gank you and you're not ready. So what do you do? And you're Intel? What do you do? Oh no, what do we do? Activate panic mode, activate panic mode, activate panic mode, i7 8700K, activate. Oh no, going quick. Bam, double launch. Kaby Lake, Coffee Lake. Dual generations in the same year. It's called panic mode. Panic mode. It happens. Because they were so used to the copy-paste. Quad-core hyperthreading. Quad-core hyperthreading. 2014 quad-core hyperthreading Broadwell. 2013 quad-core hyperthreading Haswell. 2012 quad-core hyperthreading Ivy Bridge. 2011 quad-core hyperthreading Sandy Bridge. You had the quad-cores with the hyperthreading. Quad-core hyperthreading. Then all of a sudden, whoa, invasion, invader, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, invader. I like how the Ryzen is like literally, there's the chat box appears like right over the Ryzen 7. It's like an invader. It's like double launch quick. Oh, but guess what? This wasn't a quad core. 6-core 12 thread versus 8-core 16 thread. I like how that Ryzen is literally constantly covered up by chat messages. It's like, don't show it. Don't show Ryzen. It's the invader. So anyway, the last time Intel did nothing, The reason why I wanted to point this out is because Intel could do nothing this year. They literally could do nothing. But they rarely ever do nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, they did nothing in 2016, as far as I remember. So they could literally do nothing in 2025. 9 years later, you could literally just do nothing. And just wait until next year. So I don't know. I think because they almost did nothing back in 2023. 14 gen is just 13 gen. All the tech enthusiasts know this. So they could do the same thing. They're probably going to do a Arrow Lake Plus for 2025. So, because you need 2 years. You need 2 years for your new generation. And 2025 is the year after Arrow Lake, so it's not 2 years, so you're going to need to wait another year. So that's just how product development works. So anyway, that's the CPUs. Now let's talk about the GPUs. So now, 2026 is supposed to be the year of the big GPUs. The big GPUs. RTX 6090, RTX 6080. And then the mysterious, the mystical unknown, the AMD next gen. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if it's going to be called UDNA. I don't know if it's going to be called RDNA 5. Nobody knows what the name truly will be. But all I know is that it's going to be a big comeback. Big comeback. We'll just leave that there. One thing I do want to mention also, I forgot to say, Xbox Ally X is coming this winter. So there are 2 new handhelds. So technically, we are in the half generation for the consoles. This is the half. We're at the halfway point. So PS5 Pro was last year. Switch 2 is this year. Xbox is changing their strategy. Their new strategy is Xbox everywhere. So next year there will be no new consoles at all. No consoles next year. Absolutely no consoles. So unless Sony wants to launch a mysterious handheld, I don't think it's going to come next year. I think it's at least 2 years out. But what I will tell you is that we know when the PlayStation 6 is coming out. We can make that prediction. So now this brings us to 2027. This is the year after next year. So in 2027, there will be Zen 6X 3D. If things follow the same pattern. Now, they don't always have to, but we can predict with high degree of accuracy. And there can be whatever Intel puts out, Nova Plus, or whatever they want to call it, whatever it is. We'll just leave that as like a placeholder for now. And then we have a bunch of new graphics cards in 2027. A lot of new graphics cards are coming in 2027. We have the 6070 Ti, the 6070, the 6060 Ti, the 6060. Man, that's a hilarious sounding name. And then you have the AMD stuff. Now, I don't know what the AMD cards will be called. They probably have to go to a new naming convention unless they want to do the 10,000. No, see, I don't think they're going to do that. What are they going to call it? Like the 10... What? You know what would be funny? If AMD's next gen is the 1090 and the 1080. The RX 1080. Can you imagine if they do that? If they just stop. I don't think they're going to do it, but it will be hilarious. RX 1090 and RX 1080. The return of the 1080. The 1080 gets reincarnated as a next gen AMD and comes back as an RX. Talk about The lore. Talk about like the man. That's crazy. This is like an anime story, like Dragon Ball Z. Like the 1080 literally comes back from Otherworld, although now it's on Red Team. Like what? That would be hilarious. Like they could totally do that too, and everyone would be cool with that. You know why? Do you guys remember GTX 480 and RX 480 and RX 580? Okay, well, and GTX 580, they could totally do that. They could loop it. If they want, they can do it. NVIDIA's not going to be able to do anything about it because it's like, oh, it's RX, it's not GTX. They could call the next gen the RX 1090 and the RX 10. I think that would be a great name. That would be hilarious if they did that. Because no one knows what the new cards will be called. They'll have a new convention, new naming convention. The RX 1090. I mean, unless, I guess they could technically do this. 9090. 9090 sounds kind of dumb. So I don't see them doing that. They're not going to do that because they want to distinguish this as a new architecture from RDNA 4, and that is exactly what they will be. So it would not make sense to call them 9000 series. They will not be 9000 series. They will have some other name. I don't know what the name will be, but that's what they will be. But the point is, in 2027, they will refresh the lineup. So meaning, those of you who have a 9070, any of the 9000 series cards, the successor to those cards is 2 years away from now. 2027 is when the successor to the 9070 XT will appear. So this will be like AMD 70 XT, AMD 70, AMD 60 XT, AMD, I don't know, I'm just using placeholders because I don't know the name of these cards. The next gen for next year will only be the AMD 90 XT and the AMD 80 XT. Or whatever they end up calling it. But that is 2020. The end of 2026 will be the big graphics cards that go against the 6090 and the 6080. And then the 2027 year, so 2 years from now, is the refresh for all of the, I don't want to say peasants or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Like the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, all those cards get refreshed the following year. Every 2 years. So, because you can look at it, it plays out the same every 2 years. 2021, 2023. 2025. Oh, look, all these cards. Oh, look, 2027. Oh, very predictable. So the only thing that kind of moves around and shifts around is the super high end. The super high end. So meaning these could push into Q1 of next year, just like what happened with the 50 series. But I think those are going to come at the end of next year. You know why? Because the 50 series is kind of not very popular. The power problems with the 5090, I think NVIDIA wants to address that with a 6090 that actually fixes that problem. However, next year, I forgot to mention one thing. If NVIDIA is going to do the Super, 50 Supers will be next year. In the first half of next year, you'll get 50 series Supers. So, oh, that is, yeah, we should have mentioned that because the 5080 Super would be like a 24 gigabyte GPU. So 5080 Super, all those Supers will be next year, the beginning of next year, first half. So you'll see like, you know, this and whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to do chronological order, but we kind of screwed this up by putting this here. Just know that if they're supers or whatever they do, whatever NVIDIA does, I don't know how many different super variants there are. They would do the supers. Oh, and we completely forgot about Intel's GPUs. I got to go and add Intel's GPUs. So, but yeah, so 50 supers would be like first half, and then the true successors would be at the end of the year. So just keep that in mind. You guys can see the pattern. Supers come out, and then they get replaced in the same year. Although NVIDIA kind of like made them a little bit more relevant this time, because they actually didn't launch these two cards last year when they were supposed to launch in this window. They didn't do it. So they kind of broke with tradition, we'll say. Now I got to put Intel in here. So Intel A770, A750, and then in here, A380. I don't even know if I want to mention the A380. Forget about the A380. Just do A770, A750. Oh, whoops. The very end of last year, like literally the end of last year, was the B580. And then this year, we had B570. I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It was like somewhere in the beginning of the year. But we'll just throw it right here because we're running out of space. I'll just put him right here. Yeah, he's the winner. He's on top of those guys. Okay, so you can see, again, what is the general trend? 2022. 2 years later. Oh, look. This one just missed by like a month or two. So 2 years. So when will Intel's next generation be? Next year is going to be an Intel launch. So Intel could make a big splash next year. Intel's next gen GPU. Intel's next gen GPU. So you have Intel's next GPU next year. You have AMD's next gen GPU being introduced next year. You have the 6090, you have the 6080. So this is the reason why I'm telling you guys, now it makes more sense why I was saying that 2026 is going to be another big, big year for the tech enthusiasts. Because now you guys can see the full roadmap. You can see the timeline of events as they play out. 2020, massive year. You had consoles. You had Zen 3. You had RTX 3080, 6800 XT. 2022, brand new architecture from AMD, brand new socket from AMD, AM5, 5800 X3D. You had the supers and the first half. Then in the second half, you had Intel's GPUs. 40 series was introduced with the 4090 and the 4080. The 7900 AMD's RDNA 3 with the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT. So for those of you that are true hardware enthusiasts, the even numbered years tend to be the more interesting years. Have you noticed that? If you're someone who likes to see the benchmark results of the really big, meaty graphics cards, like the 3090, the 6900 XT, the 3090 Ti, the 4090, the XTX, last year was kind of an exception because these guys were supposed to be over here and they were missing in action. So you can see how last year was kind of a weird year. If you're someone who upgrades your CPUs, typically, unless you're someone who's really into X3D, X3D seems to be an odd-numbered product. Usually, that seems to be the trend. Whereas the regular AMD and the new sockets are introduced on the even-numbered years. So, when you look at this, I wouldn't be surprised if next year we get a new socket from AMD. Now, some people might not like hearing that, but I wouldn't be surprised if AMD introduces AM6 next year. because it's an even numbered year, and Zen 5 or AM5 came out in 2022, it makes sense that a new socket could come in 2026, because initially they said through 2025, then they kind of said through 2026. Now they're saying through 2027. That doesn't necessarily mean you get a new CPU on that socket. It means that the support for the socket will still be getting product. Doesn't necessarily mean it will be like the latest and greatest. So I wouldn't be surprised if next year Zen 6 is on AM6. It makes sense because it's technically like, what is that? That's like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's like 4 years. 4 years out. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Intel's every 2 years. So if AMD's doing 4 years, that's significantly better. Because you look at the... This is LGA 1200. This is LGA 1700. This is LGA 1851. So next year, Intel most likely will introduce a new socket. Meaning AMD, so, okay, let's just show them in colors. Intel, 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 Intel. Now let's do AMD sockets. You had that one. That was AM4. AM5. Did I do that right? Whoops. AM5. And we'll do AM6 in, like, I don't know, this color. AM6. So AMD sockets will be like twice as long as Intel's. So I wouldn't be surprised if AM or Zen 6 will be on AM6. If you're someone who upgrades every generation or every other generation. Yeah, Intel has operated 2 years. 2 years socket lifespan. Intel sockets are 24-month active lifespan. Or I guess current gen lifespan. So to me, I kind of expect Zen 6 to be on a new socket. Because it's still double the lifespan of Intel sockets. Do we know for a fact if Zen 6 is going to be on AM5? I don't think anyone actually knows. If Zen 6 is on AM5, then that means that the socket will have an insanely long lifespan for modern, like for because we've illustrated here how even if it's a new socket next year, it's still double the lifespan of the Intel socket. Well, Zen 7 is definitely AM6. The one that I'm curious is Zen 6. Because Zen 7 is 2028. So if we go further out, now we're looking far into the future. You have Zen 7 in 2028. Actually, we're not done with 2027. But yeah, 2028, we have Zen 7 and Intel Next. New Intel socket. Then, in the GPU space, we have the RTX 7090. And actually, hold on. We have the 6080S. Basically, 60 supers. Then you have the 7090, the 7080, the AMD Next, whatever the other AMD GPU would be that replaces the ones that are coming out at the end of next year. So AMD's Next Best or flagship or something like Next, I don't know, AMD Best or whatever, like whatever the next one is, next, or I'll just say next gen, future, the future one. I forgot one thing. Somewhere here is the PS6. The PS6, as it stands right now, it is unknown whether the PS6 will launch at the end of 2027 or if it will launch at the end of 2028. Now, this largely depends on what Sony's plans are for the mobile market for like handheld gaming, because of the Xbox Ally X, Sony is now kind of forced to respond with some similar strategy. They cannot just sit there and do nothing. That's not an option anymore. So they have to introduce some kind of handheld. Now, if we ignore the handhelds and we look only at the consoles, the big box consoles, if we follow that cadence, the PS6 will launch in the holiday season of 2027. Remember that year. 2027 is PlayStation 6. That, unless the time frame changes because of how they have to deal with responding to the Xbox Ally X, and also they need to get in there to disrupt the Switch 2. Now, that could change this launch cadence. But typically, the reason why I can predict this with very high confidence is because the PlayStation consoles have what Sony calls a 10-year lifespan. Now, that doesn't mean that you go a full decade with one console and then after 10 years you launch the next console. That is not what that means. That means that the existing console has a generational lifespan of up to 10 years, is what Sony has said. Now, you look at the PlayStation 3, because they only started using this 10-year lifespan during the PlayStation 3 generation. They never said this back in the PS1 era or the PS2 era. But if you look at the time frame, the PlayStation 3 was introduced at the end of 2006. So you don't really count 2006 because it was like that's like, okay, November, December 2006. So I would say 2007 is where I count the first full year. So we have 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. How many years is that? That's 7 years. At 7 years into the PlayStation 3's lifespan, Sony launched the PlayStation 4. So they go 7 years, even though they support up to 10 years. Because you guys remember, there's always a transitional period. Once a new console comes in, that doesn't mean that developers immediately ignore the old console. That is not true. They continue to make their games for the existing previous console for several years. You look, I think of games like the Persona series, Persona 4. If I look up the Persona 4 release date, the original release date for Persona 4, which was a PlayStation 2 game, was July 10th, 2008. This is well into the PlayStation 3's lifespan. In fact, the PlayStation 3, had Metal Gear Solid 4 before Persona 4 came out on the PlayStation 2. Meaning, the PlayStation 2, which launched in the year 2000, continued to have a lifespan up to 10 years, 2010. I mean, by that time, like, there were very few games that were PS2. But that's the whole point that I'm making. So meaning, roughly 7 years or so, Sony will introduce a new console. They're operating on the 7-year life cycle. And you guys remember, if you watch this channel's live streams, you'll remember I always talk about the 3-year, the 5-year, and you guessed it, the 7-year mark. When a computer component becomes 3 years old, it becomes middle-aged. When it becomes 5 years old, it becomes elderly. And when it becomes 7 years old, it is pushing past retirement. It needs to retire. It's becoming ancient. So, around the 7-year mark, Sony goes all the way to the final number, 7 years. They'll do 7 years and then introduce the next generation. And they'll allow the previous generation to sunset into that decade of its lifespan, that full 10 years. That is how Sony has operated since the PlayStation 3 generation. And they kind of handled the PlayStation 2 either indirectly or directly on those same principles, if you look at it. So, 7 years. When the PlayStation 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. When the PlayStation 5 reaches 7 years of age, is when you can expect the successor to be introduced. Again, my 3, 5, and 7 year lifespan logic again proves itself here. So the PlayStation 6 will come in the holiday season of 2027, which means it is still more than 2 years away. Remember this, because I think this will be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, the wild card is, what will Sony do regarding the response to the Xbox Ally X? Because Microsoft's strategy has shifted dramatically. They're literally changing the rules of the game. When you can't win, remember what I told you guys, if you can't win, you change the rules of the game. You change the rules of the game. So, they have failed to win against the PlayStation 5. I think the total sales volume of the Xbox Series X is like 23 million units or so. The PlayStation 5 is like, what, 60-something million? It's like, what, that's like 3 times the amount almost. So, in general, we don't know exactly what they're going to do. We just know that they need some, Sony is who I'm referring to. They need some sort of strategy in terms of how they're going to respond to the handheld. And the thing is, they've noticed this, that the handheld market has really grown from kind of like a grassroots with like the Steam Deck. Obviously, Nintendo has been doing the Switch. They've been doing their own thing basically since the 7th generation of consoles, like with the original Wii. Like, they're definitely not competing directly with Sony and Microsoft. They have a completely different way of approaching the gaming industry. They're more of like an entertainment company, which you can look at Sony as an entertainment company. Like, Sony Entertainment. It's in the name. However, I don't really know what their strategy will be for handheld. I just know that they probably are strongly considering doing something for the handheld market. In fact, who knows? They could completely scratch the traditional big box console. They could cancel the PlayStation 6, although I don't know if they'll do that, because it really depends on how far into development they are, in favor of developing a handheld PlayStation 6 instead and doing exactly what Nintendo did with the original Switch, and kind of following the Steam Deck and the Ally X, but they just don't have, like, the problem for Sony, they're the ones that are in the weirdest position right now, and a lot of people don't realize this, that Sony stands to lose the most in terms of long-term market share and viability as a hardware vendor for in the gaming space, because they do not have the same sort of leverage that Microsoft has, in the sense that Microsoft literally owns Windows. So unless gamers can be convinced to switch to Linux, and you know they're not going to do it, they're going to stay on their Windows 11. They're going to keep their Windows 11 slop, and they're just going to keep using that Windows 11 until it turns into Windows 12 or whatever. You know, like, the gamers are going to stay on that platform. That's not changing anytime soon. So Microsoft can exert more control, and this is, you can already see them trying to do this with their new strategy, Xbox everywhere. So they don't care if you're on mobile, they don't care if you're on the physical console, although Xbox everywhere kind of indicates that they may or may not continue a traditional console model. But the PC is a space that they want to get more control over in terms of how they're perceived by the gamers in the gaming market. Because I think a lot of gamers, when they think of PC gaming, they de facto think of Steam. And I think Microsoft wants to change that perception. They don't want PC gamers to think of, like, they don't want to think, if they hear PC gaming, they feel like it's synonymous with Steam. I think Microsoft is tired of that. They want to move that sort of viewpoint back to in favor of, oh, gaming on PC, that means gaming on Windows. Gaming on Xbox is also gaming on Windows. That is kind of what they want. I think that is kind of their long-term strategy, and we're certainly seeing them go directly up against Steam with the announcement of partnering up with ASUS and the ROG brand. They want to leverage that partnership to prove that they have a better hybrid console and a better platform and ecosystem in totality compared to Steam, which has the Steam application and, you know, the Steam Deck or Steam, whatever, like, you're running basically on Windows. So, and they're not going to stop people from downloading Steam and running Steam on the Ally X. They're not going to do that, but it's on Microsoft to convince the gamers to switch from Steam to Xbox on the PC platform. I think that is really what Microsoft is going to start doing in the next couple of years. Okay. First thing you think of when you... Yeah, I would say the average gamer would agree with that statement. I mean, it depends on the type of games you play, though. Like, I mean, for me personally, the only time I use Steam is if I'm going to live stream, like, Elden Ring Night Rain or Lies of P or any of those action games that you've seen me stream recently. But I don't use Steam for, like, most of the other games. Like, I don't use Steam for... okay, Monster Hunter Wilds is, like, one that I can think of. Monster Hunter Wilds, I'll use Steam for Monster Hunter Wilds. But I do not use Steam for Genshin Impact. I don't use Steam for Final Fantasy XIV. I don't use Steam... Basically, any MMO or live service game, I don't use Steam at all. No. I launch the game natively from its own launcher. So but I don't know. See, that's the thing about the PC platform, though. There's no sense of centralized... You can think of Steam as like a centralized dashboard or a hub point to access your game library, But this is exactly what Microsoft wants to replace. Microsoft wants you to, instead of going to Steam, they want you to go to Xbox on your PC, whether that's through Game Pass or, the Xbox dashboard, whatever. That is what they want you to do. They don't want you, they would prefer that you don't use Steam and instead use Xbox on PC. Yeah, and Epic does a good job at giving away games for free randomly. Yeah, GOG. Yep, that's a good one too. See, so that again goes back to what I'm saying. There's no uniform standardization on the PC platform. There's a bunch of alternatives, which is a good thing because you have competition that way. So Steam is definitely the largest. They're like the market leader on the PC platform compared to the others, like GOG and Xbox themselves and Epic Game Store and others. Amazon Prime Games, I've never actually used that, so I have no experience with that at all. I guess if somebody plays New World, would they use Amazon to launch New World? Although the people that I know that play New World, they use Steam to access that game, which is done by Amazon too. So I don't know. That's... Yeah, the thing about the free games, though, I mean, that's nice that you get free games, but what type of free games do you get from Prime, though? Like, the best free game that I've seen was from Epic Games, and it was Ghostwire Tokyo. I mean, that was straight up just like free on Epic Games Store. I mean, there's a couple of other examples. I think Godfall was another one that was free a few years ago on Epic Games. You got Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor on Prime Gaming. Okay. Yeah, typically they're going to be the older games, but that's fine. That's fine. That's good, though. Okay, well, I think we covered everything. We've been live for 3.5 hours. Yeah, we pretty much talked about everything, really. So we've done the timeline, which covers the upcoming CPUs. It went way beyond upcoming CPUs. So you guys can see this is the timeline for the product roadmaps, both past and present and future. You should save that graphic. Yeah, I'll save it. I'll save it. Now, the things that I don't really... Okay, I just want to say one thing. Supers are not guaranteed. I want to preface this so people understand this. Supers are not guaranteed. We're not guaranteed to get 50 supers next year. We're not guaranteed to get 60 supers in 2028. Supers are kind of like... NVIDIA does them as kind of reactionary based off of node inventory. Or like, not node inventory, chip inventory. Like if they have a bunch of a GPU SKU that was supposed to be a larger or like a higher end part and they downbin it because it was like flawed in some way. That is basically what super cards are consisting of. So not always, because the 4080 Super in particular, this one was actually the full die. That's why I call this the 4080 Ti, because this is kind of like a fully enabled die of whatever the 4080 chip was. So they don't always do this. Supers are not guaranteed, but in general, if NVIDIA does a super series, you can expect them to always be in the first half of the even numbered, well, no. Yes, that's right. The even numbered year. The first half, meaning you typically are better off avoiding the super cards and just completely skipping them because you will have terrible buyer's remorse. The 3090 Ti, you can think of this as like a 3090 Super, is a prime example of this. People who bought the 3090 Ti and paid like $2,000 for the Founders Edition back in 2022 had to sink that cost when the $1,600 4090 launched in the second half of that year. So in general, if you're looking for buying advice, skip the Super series. Now, last year is kind of a strange exception because remember, the 5090 and the 5080, for all intents and purposes, were supposed to launch in Q4 of last year. So they're technically 2024 graphics cards, but I don't know how they're shifting them by one quarter, basically shifting them into the year where all the 70s and 60s, you know, like the odd number year that has all your 70s and 60 cards, those years, by moving them into the following year. I don't know what the long-term implications are of how that may affect the next generation. Like, I don't know if this creates a domino effect where this will force the 6090 and the 6080 to also move into 2027. I mean, that could possibly happen. So it depends on how NVIDIA... It really depends on the yields and the margins and where NVIDIA is in, like, their earnings for the quarters. Meaning, if NVIDIA blows out their number for the quarter, and when I say number, I'm talking about the sales number, like how much they sold for their fiscal year, they could easily, like, hold these cards back and push them out if they need to clear inventory because they already met quota or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, like, there's stuff that they can do. So those are the sort of factors that can cause this timeline to shift. But in general, this is an accurate timeline for all intents and purposes. Meaning, the worst that could happen is these get moved by like 3 months, up to 90 days. But most of, like, the 70, the 60, all these type of things, they're not going to move. Those pretty much will be 2027 at this point. Like, yeah. Unless something catastrophic happens to TSMC and the node gets held up for, like, who knows how long, this time frame is accurate. So if you're into PCs, 2026 should be a big year. New Intel GPU, new Intel socket, possibly new AMD socket, new NVIDIA flagship, new AMD flagship. Just skip the super cards if they come out in the first half of next year. That's my advice. Otherwise, you'll have buyer's remorse in the event that, like, a 60 class comes out in the second half, because there's a high probability that it will, based off of all of the patterns that we've looked at on this stream. So we've looked at socket launch patterns, we've looked at GPU, CPU patterns. All of the patterns predict the future. You can use all of this data to predict this outcome. I mean, if someone were to feed all current hardware generation release to an AI, the AI would probably come up with basically the same result. Now, the console thing, they'd have to feed them more data. They can't just say, hey, PS5, add 7 years. It's like, how is it going to determine that? Well, you have to look at the PS4 to conclude, oh, 7 years. Okay, 2027. So holiday 2027 will be PlayStation 6, unless the console market changes forever because of the handhelds and what Xbox is doing. But alright guys, that's probably going to be it for this stream. It makes sense when I look at this because Yeah. It makes sense for the Pro to have a 3-year lifespan before the PS6, because it would be 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. All right, well, we covered a lot of stuff on this stream. We derived the timeline for next generation releases. So, but this kind of shows people, you know, like if you have a, like if you're thinking of upgrading, your GPU and you're trying to decide, like, should you upgrade or should you wait? If you're somebody who only buys 70 class products, so like, let's say you have a 3070 Ti, and you're thinking, should you get any of these cards? Or maybe you're considering, well, because this is so expensive now, you're considering these 4 graphics cards. You're better off buying one of these now instead of, otherwise you're going to be waiting for 2 more years with your 3070 Ti if you're trying to skip the current generation. Now, if you're someone who's on 40, let's say you have a 7700 XT or a 4070 or something, or any of these. You're someone who has one of these cards. Now, you could skip this generation. This is why most people don't upgrade every generation, because you're probably not going to see a massive benefit unless you're somebody who paid like what, like $800 for $800 for a 4070 Ti 12 gig, $600 for an Asus Prime 9070 XT, so that's like $200 less than what you paid 2 years ago for the 4070 Ti, and the 9070 XT is basically a 4080 Super. So I don't know, it depends on, like, do you consider that a worthwhile upgrade? It's current generation RDNA 4. Typically, AMDs will get longer support compared to NVIDIA, meaning as soon as 60 series drops, you can kiss the 50 series goodbye in terms of optimization. So it's kind of like, that's kind of how things go. So it's like if someone's on 40 or 7000 series and they're mid-range, I would tell them you're probably better off skipping this generation as long as you do not intend to upgrade your monitor anytime soon. So you're going to be holding out until 2027. Unless you plan on buying, like, unless you try to buy like a Super, assuming those even will exist next year, or you wait for the big Intel and the big AMD and the big NVIDIA, which you're going to be waiting for a while still. So, I don't know. Just something to think about. But alright, guys, this was an interesting one. Not as hands-on as last week, but I think the paint time is probably useful. Anyway, that's going to be it for this stream. We will be streaming Death Stranding 2 this weekend on PlayStation 5 Pro in performance mode at 4K 60. That game is currently the next game that I plan on finishing. So that is really the only one, unless Monster Hunter Wilds has a title update real soon. Expect to just see Death Stranding 2 for a while. I mean, the only other games that we'll probably stream would be Monster Hunter Wilds, or maybe Elden Ring Night Rain. Any of those 3. But for now, it's going to be Death Stranding 2 for the weekend live streams. So if you're curious on how that game looks and runs or whatever, or if you just want to hang out and ask tech-related questions, you can stop by either tomorrow evening or maybe Saturday evening. Those streams aren't guaranteed, though. Those are based off of scheduling and availability. But we will be doing that. So for those of you that are new to the channel, we do these sort of live streams every Thursdays. This is Tech Thursdays. So if you have tech-related questions, if you're building a PC for the first time, or if you're an industry veteran and you just want to hang out and ask questions, or just interact with the chat. This is a growing community, all things PC DIY, not necessarily gaming. We do talk about gaming on the channel. But if you're someone who has nothing to do, you have no interest in the gaming, you just want to talk about the technology, maybe you're a power user, maybe you do advanced things with the computer that gamers typically don't do, feel free to discuss those things as well, because I may know a thing or two about that as well as a power user. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and if you're not going to tune in this weekend on the live stream, I will catch you guys next Thursdays on the next episode of Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I will see you then. Thanks.